resolved acceptably?
That was resolved.
That was resolved. Okay. There will be no agenda changes.
Are you guys satisfied with the answers on 3 Mile Restoration? Were you guys satisfied with the answers on 3 Mile Restoration? Mm-hmm.
I don't remember what the questions were.
We're satisfied.
I guess I'm
Excellent.
satisfied.
There you go. If you can't remember, you're satisfied.
You're too young to have that problem.
That's why it's so hard over on this side of the fence.
I don't think I had the questions, so I apologize. All right, are there any council comments?
I've got one, if I may.
Go ahead, Jim.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to sort of publicly acknowledge Yvette, who I don't believe is here, and Steve Boyd and Deborah, and also frankly, our financial advisory board. The city received a recognition from the Government Finance Officers Association for the first time ever for an award called the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. And that was for the 2018 budget. And basically the award says it's, aims to promote transparency with each line item, public discussion, and availability. And that's a hell of an achievement because there are less than 200 entities, be they counties or municipalities in the country, that receive that award. So this really is a great achievement. I sort of feel you probably won't read that one on the front page of the newspaper, unfortunately, but to have a budget that's called out for being so transparent and so well presented is a great achievement. So I just wanted to sort of publicly congratulate our city staff and financial advisory board for that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. Rick?
Yeah, just to say we had a meeting on Tuesday night, and I think that we resolved a lot of the issues about cell towers in residential neighborhoods. I want to thank the staff and the people that participated in that decision and the council for moving that part of the zoning code forward. So, thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Any other council comments? All right, so we can move on to the consent agenda. Our consent agenda tonight consists of item A, which is the receipt of minutes of the July 19th, 2018 regular meeting and the minutes for the July 16th, 2018 special meeting. Resolution 2018-26, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Glendale Springs, Colorado, accepting a grant from the Colorado River Water Conservation District for the restoration of the Two Rivers Park shoreline. Resolution 2018-28, a resolution of the City of Glendale Springs, Colorado, approving the award of a contract for shoreline restoration improvements at Veltus Park and the 3 Mile Confluence. Item D is trash easement agreement within Block 43 on county property. Item E is lease agreement between the City of Glendale Springs, Colorado and Glenwood Tramway LLC. Item F is Resolution 2018-32, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Glendale Springs, Colorado, reaffirming City Council's support for a grant from Garfield Mineral Lease District for the 7th Street Plaza. Item G is Resolution 2018-33, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Glendale Springs, Colorado, adopting engineering standards. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as stated.
I move.
Second.
We have a motion by Rick and a second by Todd to approve the consent agenda. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We move on to agenda item 15, adoption of our new land use code and related fees, which is ordinance number 19, series of 2018, and ordinance of the City of Glendale Springs repealing and replacing Title 070 of the Glenwood Municipal Code and amending other sections of the municipal code that reference Title 070. This is a second reading.
Tonight, I'm just going to review the recommended changes and questions that have come up regarding the adoption draft after the first reading. As Councilman Voorhees indicated, this past Tuesday, Council met and discussed wireless communication facilities with staff and interested residents. And collectively, I believe we now all better understand the differences between towers, attached wall-mounted small cell facilities, and alternative small cell facilities both in and outside of the right-of-way. And these images show each of those differences and their specific design requirements. Council directed staff at that meeting to make, there we go, to make certain changes to the purpose statement in the wireless communications section of the code. Basically, we eliminated most of the encourage words and replaced them with more directive statements, and those are shown on your screen. We also changed the land use table by removing the wireless communication facility from the industrial use category, and we placed them in their own land use table as its own land use category. And those actually have been included in your updated errata sheet that are part of your packet, and specifically those are item 10 on that errata sheet, page 3. Next, I understand that this morning you all met with the Parks and Recreation Commission, and there were some questions about how this code addressed cemeteries, mortuaries, and related type funeral uses. And just to be clear, cemeteries, funeral homes, mortuaries are permitted use in the 2 industrial zones that we have, as well as the new institutional zone that we will have as part of this code. They're permitted uses. Then they are special review uses in all of the commercial zone districts and 2 of the residential zone districts, and specifically those are the RH and RT zones, which are currently the R3 and R4 zone districts. So hopefully that addresses the questions that came up at that meeting. Finally, between the first and this reading, we found a possible error that needs your direction. Specifically, the new code states that except for properties that are located in the downtown core, the limits of disturbance for single-family, detached residential uses, as well as accessory structures, shall not exceed 50% of the total gross area of the lot or 20,000 square feet, whichever is less. The issue here is that this could limit the ability of single-family homeowners outside of the downtown from constructing an addition, deck, patio, or garage if their existing home and related improvements exceed that 50% lot coverage. We didn't think that this was your intention. Instead, we believe that it was intended that this provision only apply to properties that have steep slope conditions, and by that I mean properties with slopes over 20%. So I'm seeing nods, and if that is the case, we will include that in the errata sheet and make that change. So with that, that's the end of any presentation I have, so I'll take questions if you have them.
Thanks, Gretchen. Any questions for Gretchen? Shelley?
I had a couple that were in the packet. Let's see. First of all was on, I just had a question, maybe I'm reading this out of context, but in your memo on page 2, you're talking about single-family detached residential uses in the hillside development. You talk about building sites and the principal structure and any major accessory structures plus area necessary to provide accessory driveway and necessary septic system. Do we allow septic systems?
We do.
The city limits.
Right. There are a few properties along Midland that are not served by the city sewer.
So we still have a couple that are unbuilt that are getting septic?
We do.
Okay. I was thinking.
It's not a usual situation.
Okay. And then I had another one on page 7 of the errata.
Errata sheet.
Yep. Let's see.
Oh, right, in the blue.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
blue, item
15.
number 15. When was that change made, and
I should
can
have.
you kind of explain that?
Yes, and I apologize, I should have mentioned this in my memo. We found that the current text this, for everybody's benefit, this deals with the common open space provisions, and there is a provision in the common open space that doesn't allow us to count lands with average slopes over 20%
Right.
as part of common open space, and yet in the intent section, in all of the sections of the common open space requirements, there's language that encourages us to allow people with steep slopes to preserve them as open space. In other words, you don't want to build on steep slopes, anything over 20%.
Okay.
So we don't want to not count them. And that's what this correction does. It basically allows us to count lands with average slopes over 20% as meeting a common open space requirement.
Okay. And what's the purpose of that common open space?
Every type of development is required to provide a certain percentage of the overall development as common open space, and there's a lot of things like your setbacks, patio, plaza,
Right.
just common yard area as common open space. It's just an open space landscape requirement.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Is it meant to be usable space, or is it
Some,
just more for visual?
Both, actually. There's part that encourages you to have open space. It could be active, it could be passive, it could just be preserving areas of geologic or natural interest. Again, the steep slopes would qualify.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Is that it, Shelley?
Yep, that's
Okay.
all I have. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Gretchen.
Rick?
Yeah. When we talked a little bit this morning, and maybe for the benefit of the public, Gretchen, can you provide just a quick overview of the parking ratios for multifamily developments, maybe where we've been and what this code does?
Okay, for multifamily development, the current code requires 2 parking spaces per unit plus a guest space every 5 units and an RV space every 5 units. So I think the percentage is around 2.4%, or 2.4 spaces per unit. This code, however, reduces the parking requirement to 1.5 spaces per unit, but we retain the requirement to provide a guest space every 5 spaces. So the ratio is now, or the requirement is 1.7 spaces per unit. And what we found that this addresses a lot of the recent variances that we've seen that have come through, primarily with, for example, Oasis Creek development, the Lost development, Glenwood Green. They all have 1.5 to 1.7 parking spaces per unit. It's also fairly consistent with where many of the communities are headed in this state. I'm not going to say all, because parking is sort of all over the board. I do have a chart, if you'd care to see it, that was put together in 2015 by a previous planner that shows the communities around the state. All right, this is split into 2 or 3 screens, but all the yellow highlights are the communities that have parking spaces requirements that are in line with Glenwood's or that are actually less. So we've got Boulder, Delta, Denver, Frederick, Frisco, and Fruita. Fort Collins, Fort Morgan, Golden, Grand Junction, Gunnison, La Junta, Leadville, Salida, Trinidad, and Vail. And some of them you can see require different spaces depending upon the number of bedrooms that they have.
So the difference between Glenwood and some of these other communities is that we're, in terms of available land, sort of built out in many ways. And, you know, when you're on the prairie, you can keep going. And in Glenwood, you're enveloped by a set of mountains on both sides, you know, or all three sides. So I just wonder if there would come a time when council would think about that 1.5 ratio as being, you know, detrimental to the quality of life of people that live in apartment buildings, and whether we would consider, maybe not now, but in the near future, raising that as a fair expectation for new buildings, you know, knowing that what we've done in the past is already sort of set in stone, and there may be, you know, some empirical data like Mike was talking about earlier today to suggest that when you're driving through on a Sunday night and you see a 1.5 ratio apartment building and you see, you know, maybe half the space is not used, maybe it wouldn't be a prudent thing to do. But you know, I don't think that this is an issue that's going to go away with people who are moving to town, living in apartment buildings, and have 2 cars. So.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we can certainly monitor the situation with the developments that come through, and revisit the parking issue, not just with the multifamily, but with other types of developments in town. I mean, we can take a look at all of the commercial requirements. Some believe that our parking requirements are for some of the commercial uses are more than what we need. Certainly, I mean, this code is supposed to be a living document, and if things aren't working, we certainly can bring it back for council's reconsideration, elements of it for council's reconsideration.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Any other questions for Gretchen? All right, thanks, Gretchen.
Sure.
At this point, I would open it up to the public for anyone who would like to comment on our new land use code. Sir, come up, give us your name and address, and please try and limit your remarks to under 3 minutes if you could.
Okay, Hayden Rader, P.O. Box 686, Glenwood Springs, Colorado. Thank you for hearing me, and I'm here again for the ground that I have that consists of basically 65 lots. Part of it sits at the base of the Scout Trail and includes the Scout Trail, a total of 24 acres. Last I talked to you, I just kind of gave you a brief overview, and we've been kind of working through some of the basic issues and some of the code and understanding of the existing code and the new code, and staff has been really helpful in helping me to figure out where we're at, because we had a timeline that we needed to meet before this code becomes adopted fully. So we've been reacting to it. Just a quick recap is we have been, my partners and I, sitting here with me in support of our acquisition. We purchased the property, you know, roughly going on 20 years now, and since then have been leasing the Scout Trail to the city for a nominal $10 a year, just to keep it active and for everyone. And I wasn't clear on that where we were at the last time I was here, so just to clarify, that was basically the case. And just letting you know, we're part of, you know, helping the city to fulfill its needs of the citizens and the public and everyone here. And all we're trying to do is that we purchased this ground almost 20 years ago to develop, and now basically it appears to be kind of a time to move forward. And so staff has been very helpful in helping us move forward and kind of pointing out some of the issues and stuff in here. So more than anything, I just wanted to let you know I was here, and I had a little letter I wanted to pass out to council if I could, just kind of pitching where we're at and to help us kind of move forward. We're getting back to you again. Pass this on.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to let it kind of talk you about. Thanks. All the stuff here. Sure. Thank you, appreciate it all. We keep going this way. Sorry, guys.
Thank you. I'll pass it on to him.
Okay, thank you. Oh, sure, sorry. Yeah, I'll pass it. Perfect. Oh, I have just enough. Anyway, that's all I have, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to comment on this item? All right, seeing none, I will close it to the public and bring it back to council for discussion and/or motion.
Do we, Carl, do we need to include the additional changes that Gretchen mentioned tonight, or in the motion?
The motion to adopt would be to approve on second reading, including those changes made between first and second reading.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Okay. You guys okay if I make a motion? Anyone
Jump
wanna-
in there.
So I would move to approve ordinance 19 series 2018 repealing and replacing title 070 of the Glenwood Springs Municipal Code and amending other sections of the municipal code that reference title 070 along with the changes that were presented tonight between first and second reading.
Second.
We have a motion by Todd and a second by Steve to approve ordinance number 19, series of 2018, and an ordinance of the City of Glenwood Springs repealing and replacing Title 070 of the Glenwood Municipal Code and amending other sections of the Municipal Code that reference Title 070 with the revisions as presented this evening by the planning staff. Any further discussions? Shelley?
And I apologize, Gretchen. I had a couple other questions that I just saw in my notes that were not in my computer that I was looking at. So if you can bear with me. I had a question on there. So we're allowing in this code a fee in lieu for parking
Yes,
requirements.
Right.
Are there special circumstances where that is allowed versus where it would not be considered, or is it just kind of an unlimited, people can buy out of parking?
I'm going to let Jen handle this.
Okay, just curious.
I would anticipate bringing that to council every single time.
Every time? Okay.
That would be, it was initially how we had it written. It's written with a little more flexibility than that, but I would like to bring that to council every time.
Okay, so that's kind of how you'd handle that.
Could I follow up a real quick question on that? Have we defined in the fee schedule what that in lieu fee would be per parking space?
I don't want to steal Gretchen's thunder, but that's the next item on your agenda. We are proposing $8,000 a stall.
8,000?
And that's based on contractor real projects that have been recently, that have gone through the engineering and asphalt and all of those sort of things. It's for a surface.
Yeah,
stall.
surface space, not a structure space. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, and then my other question was on the RM1 zone. Is that 7,500 square foot lot for a duplex, is that in the current reading then?
Yeah, that's
will be
included
adopted?
in the errata sheet.
Okay.
Yep.
And then what about the downtown core, the new kind of zone district boundary for what we're calling downtown core? Is that in this adoption also?
Yes, it is.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that. Okay, that's it, thank you.
All right.
All right, thanks. Any further questions or comments? All right, we have a motion. I won't repeat it. I think it's on the record. Let's go ahead and call the question.
Ingram, yes. Davis, yes. Gamba, yes. Leahy, yes. Voorhees, yes. Kelp, yes. Motion passes.
All right, thank you. And moving on, next item, agenda item 16 is Resolution 2018-29, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, establishing a development review fee schedule and approving a cost reimbursement agreement.
As you all know, we have a number of new review procedures, and we need corresponding planning review fees. We've based the new fees on those of other communities that have similar review procedures. And over the next year, however, we intend on tracking our time spent reviewing these new applications, or applications under the new review procedures, and then fully intend on coming back before you again, revising the fees based on real time spent on these new planning applications. For the procedures that have not changed with the adoption of the new code, this proposed fee schedule updates those existing fees, which have not been really adjusted since 2015, and actually really before then. As you indicated, the resolution also includes a cost reimbursement agreement related to legal and engineering and other special professional services. Should city staff need to contract with these outside firms in order to review a particular development proposal. And a sample of what that contract would look like was included in your packet. So that's all I have.
Thanks, Gretchen. Any questions for Gretchen? Rick, go ahead.
As I look at the actual wording, special fee and cost reimbursement agreement, I'm looking at the second page of that, and I'm seeing dollar signs and blanks. Is that something that will be filled in later, or?
Correct. It would be based on the
maybe
particular.
I got an earlier copy of this.
Yeah, no, actually it would be. So the way that would work is that having done this in a lot of different jurisdictions, just not this one, you typically estimate what you think those costs are going to be when they sign the reimbursement agreement. For instance, if you think you're going to have a specialized geotech review for $1,500, that would be filled in at that time before they sign the agreement. It's trying to provide a standardized agreement that staff doesn't have to go through separate review each time that it gets executed.
So does this resolution sort of perk along until it's implemented for each person who's making an application?
Right, so you're approving just the form of the agreement, the basic form of the agreement. The numbers that get filled in would be application specific. So that agreement, every development application that came in would sign off on a reimbursement agreement if there were any of those things that needed to be provided. I think what we talked about, council had given direction on legal fees to provide 2 hours before we started billing to the applicant, essentially.
Like a 10-unit development would need far different things than like a 150-unit development.
So the idea is that that schedule would be attached to this resolution?
I mean, the numbers would be changed. They'll be tailored for each individual application.
Yeah, so the staff would be able to, you'd be able to agree to a number.
Right, exactly. And so the resolution wouldn't be, the resolution simply approving the form of the agreement. The agreement would be a separate document not attached to the the resolution, other than approving the form, that's all it's doing, and the fee schedule, obviously. But then those individual fees to be filled in for outside consultants would be based on staff and that applicant staff and that consultant's best estimate of what the costs were going to be.
For example, Rick, on the very first sentence of that agreement, it says, this special fee and cost reimbursement agreement is entered into by and between the City of Glenwood Springs, a Colorado Home Rule Municipality, the city, and blank hereinafter applicant. So we obviously can't fill that in today because we don't know who the applicant might be tomorrow.
Right.
So yeah.
So it's sort of a template.
Right, exactly.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, any further questions for Gretchen? Sorry, Shelley.
So how have we handled these fees up to this point in time? Have we not had cost recovery on them, or have we just covered it case by case?
Annexations we have.
Yeah, we have done, on some annexations, we've had a separate agreement. A good example would be the Bergeny Ranch property.
Okay.
And part of it was speed of review, frankly. That's when you had in-house counsel, and they offered to pay for outside counsel and some engineering services and we just included that in the pre-annexation agreement, that they would do that. The current code does allow for, I believe, billing back for specialized services like geotech, things like that. There's also authorization in 010, 020 underneath the city attorney to bill back for time spent on development applications. We've just never implemented it, even though that was adopted in 2004, I think.
Oh, really? Okay. So
it's
time
been on
kind
the
of
books.
above and beyond a normal review?
Yeah, I mean, what
or-
we talked about, this is not for internal staff time, and it's not for up to 2 hours of, say, my time or an associate, whoever is working on it.
Right.
That's, the vast majority of applications are going to kind of fall underneath that 2 hours for our office to review. A 3-unit development or a simple variance or something like that. Really where it kicks in is when you're spending hours and hours. A great example would be the Glenwood Meadows project.
Right, a large project like that.
A large project like that, because, when I was thinking back on that when I was in-house at the time, I literally spent hundreds of hours on that project.
Right, right.
And so for the city or the taxpayer to pick up that cost on a new development, seems appropriate to bill that time back.
Okay. Will there be any negotiation with the developer, or is there an appeal process if they don't agree, or how might that work? I mean, I'm just wondering, I'm just saying in the case of something like Meadows where.
So the way we have always handled it, Rifle's a good example where we've been doing this as a firm for 30 years now. Every development application gets its own billing number so that it's a set bill. They get to see the time, what we did. In terms of that, so they can see what work was done on that project specific basis. And certainly over the years, I don't know that we've had a few times when there's been a disagreement about time, but typically not. I haven't really run into it.
Because it's mainly legal services, it's not planning time, right?
Okay. It's not.
No, this is strictly outside services.
Okay. All right, great. Okay, thank you.
I have one question. On the $8,000 fee per parking stall, I know that in the GID and the DDA those boundaries don't coincide precisely, obviously. Like, for example, none of North Glenwood is in the GID. But using North Glenwood as an example, if I were to go in and put a 150-unit apartment building in there and pay $8,000 per stall, the only option would be a structured parking, which $8,000 per stall isn't going to cover.
No.
So do we have any leeway to charge more in different places, or is this pretty much it? Or are we obligated to accept a fee in lieu?
No, or yes and no. If I got all the questions there right. I think certainly we don't have it mapped out right now what that fee would be. That's why this is a resolution. If you guys want to change those fees, you certainly can. It is, this is kind of first stab at this, I guess, in a lot of ways.
I think this is fine for places where we're going to be doing surface parking, but where we're going to need structured parking.
Yeah, I mean, we know that structured parking is going to be closer to 40 to 50,000 a spot, more than likely.
Less than that, but yeah.
Yeah.
more than 8,000. Yeah.
Jen indicated that we would bring those to you, correct? So, I mean, I think at that point, if it requires more than that, that could be a discussion we have.
Okay. So we would effectively have the ability to negotiate it with an applicant.
Yeah, I think that, it would be worthwhile so that applicants have some idea of what they're facing to kind of map it out generally. I think would not be a bad thing. It would certainly make our job on staff easier when we're talking about these.
Yeah, okay. All right, thanks. Any other, go ahead, Jen.
I'm wondering if it would, if it would make sense to have two different fees. We could add a number for a garage cash in lieu to this.
When we built the parking structure over here, however many years ago that was, 5 or 6 years ago, the state average at that time was 19,000. We didn't hit that. We were at 27,000 with that structure. But I hope it's not 40 to 50,000 at this point. So.
Why? I was thinking about buying the ground, like doing the,
Yeah.
that's, I mean, if you did the whole thing, that's why, I mean, it's not, if you already own it, it's a little bit different. So I don't know what that number would be necessarily, but we can certainly come back with one.
Is it something that we could approve this like this and then just simply amend it at a future date when we research that? Okay.
Thanks, you guys.
Yep, thank you.
Yep.
Any further questions for Gretchen or Jen or Carl or anybody else? All right, at this point, I would open it up to the public for any comments on this item. All right, seeing none, I will close it to the public and bring it back to council for discussion and or motion.
I'll go ahead and make a motion if that's okay with everybody. I would move to approve Resolution 2018-29, establishing a development review fee schedule and approving a cost reimbursement agreement.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion by Todd and a second by Shelley to approve Resolution 2018-29, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Glen Ridge Springs, Colorado, establishing a development review fee schedule and approving a cost reimbursement agreement. Any further discussion? Let's call the question.
Ingram, yes. Davis, yes. Gamba, yes. Leahy, yes. Voorhees, yes. Kelp, yes. Motion passes.
All right, thank you. Moving on to item 17, Resolution 2018-31, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Glen Ridge Springs, Colorado, adopting the administrative manual.
For now, the administrative manual consists of a series of checklists of submittal requirements for each type of our review procedures. In the near future, the manual will also include all of the information that a developer will need in order to get through our land use review procedures, from the time they submit the development application to the time they submit for building permit to when they request a certificate of occupancy. But like I said, for now, it just consists of the checklist. So I'll take questions if you have them of me.
Any questions for Gretchen regarding this item? Thanks, Gretchen.
Sure.
Anyone in the public who would like to comment on this item? All right, seeing none, I'll close it to the public and bring it back to council for discussion and or motion.
Could you reset the board?
Oh, yes, sorry. Yes, you can go.
So I'll go ahead and make a motion again here since I'm on a roll with these ones. I move to approve Resolution 2018-31, adopting the administrative manual.
Second.
We have a motion by Todd and a second by Rick to approve Resolution 2018-31, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Glen Ridge Springs, Colorado, adopting the administrative manual. Any further discussion?
I just
wanted
to make a
Shelley?
comment. I mean, we're adopting some very sweeping code changes here, and I know that this council has been working on this long before I was elected to council, and I just appreciate that we're getting these updates done. And it's great to see these checklists. I think that'll be really useful to staff, and it's nice to see them in a manual, and I hope this works well, and if not, we will, adjust things going forward. But
Right.
I think it's been a lot of work, and I congratulate staff and council for getting through all this and getting this adopted. So.
Yeah, thanks, Shelley.
I would second that. Thanks to all the staff for helping us with this. This was a long process, a lot of work, so thanks for doing it.
And this is kind of the last element of the entire adoption of the new code, and I would note that we approved the engineering design standards manual in the consent agenda tonight, which has been quite a while in the process, and that will be, I think, well received by the construction community, so that we all know exactly what, how to build a fire hydrant, how to build a sewer manhole, or whatever it is you're happening to build. And as other than the ordinance itself, that is the development code, the engineering design manual and these last two resolutions, including the one before us now, are resolutions, and so it is anticipated that there will need to be changes as we go along. We'll observe how they work and say, oh, we need to change that element of it, whatever that element is. And so, as with the resolution, that's fairly easy to change. You know, we get the language prepared, and one council meeting, it's amended. So it doesn't require two readings and a whatever it's called, a waiting period, and that's not the right word for it, but where it goes into what is the term for after we pass an ordinance that it goes into effect?
10 days.
Oh, I know, but what's that term called?
The effective date.
There we go. Okay. So, anyway, so I guess my point there is that just like with anything, none of these things are going to be perfect, and I would hope that this council over the next 8 months and future councils continue to observe how it works or doesn't work and make appropriate changes. So
Not too many.
let's not go back to the same one.
And hopefully staff.
It's really good right now. I like it.
If something's not working, let us know.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you to Community Development, Engineering, Legal.
Yeah.
About 6 months ago, it seemed like we would never get this all done, especially together, and council for sitting through endless meetings. But it's wonderful. Thank you.
P&Z.
Yeah, P&Z and we had a steering committee that was involved in this as well. I'd like to, thank everybody involved. So, all right, any further comments, questions? Let's go ahead and call the question.
Ingram, yes. Davis, yes. Gamba, yes. Leahy, yes. Voorhees, yes. Kelp, yes. Motion passes.
All right, thanks. Next item, agenda item 18, is approval of design services during the construction of the 27th Street Bridge.
Good evening. So this contract is for design services during construction. It will encompass any RFIs that the contractor may have, shop drawing review for the design engineer. It's unlikely that we would spend the full amounts, but I wanted to have enough in there to cover any issues that may come up during the construction process.
And it's roughly 170,000?
Yeah, 162,420.
Okay. All right, any questions for Jessica on this?
I don't think so.
When did,
I was on the wrong
this
issue,
is
though.
completely irrelevant to this, but when did AMEC Foster Wheeler become Wood?
They were acquired at the beginning of the year,
Really?
so they've slowly been transitioning over.
Okay. All right. So seeing no questions, thanks. Jessica, is there anyone in the public who would like to comment on this item? All right, seeing none, I will bring it back to council for discussion and or a motion.
I will move to award a contract to Wood for design services during construction of the 27th Street Bridge project with a not-to-exceed amount of $162,420.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
A motion by Shelley and a second by Todd to award a contract to Wood for design services related to the 27th Street Bridge during construction with a not-to-exceed amount of $162,420. Any further discussion? Let's call the question.
Ingram, yes. Davis, yes. Gamba, yes. Leahy, yes. Voorhees, yes. Kelp, yes. Motion passes.
Okay, next item, agenda item 20 is the 27th Street Bridge. Oops, nope. Approval, item 19, sorry, approval of the 27th Street Construction Management Contract.
So we recently bid out, or sent out an RFQ for the construction management for 27th Street Bridge. That was a qualifications only review, so we weren't allowed to take into account any funding. Through that review, HDR was the high scorer, and we've entered into negotiations. I apologize that the original staff report didn't have the actual cost breakdown for you. I revised that this morning and got that out. The original scope of work and cost is in the back, and we've been negotiating over the last couple weeks to bring that cost down, so.
Is that in the update, is there an updated packet?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay. Oh, I see.
Did you just say that was in the, at the bottom of our package?
Yeah,
It should be in a Dropbox.
so where am I seeing scope on here? I see a lot of man-hours with,
So the first sheet, the summary sheet, that's the newest estimate. It breaks down the amount of hours, the hourly rates, and then the third page discusses the scope, what's included, and we've also included weekly inspections of both lift stations at Cottonwood and Racket Club. It's not included in this breakdown.
Page 4, the PDF? Yeah.
I'm page 4 of the PDF?
The PDF is, if you go to your Dropbox and click on
Yeah.
the agenda.
I can give you mine if you want to see.
There should be
Yeah, I'm
a
looking
new one.
at page 4 does not, is that? Okay.
Sure. Did you get this one? No. It's on the current one online.
Oh, so this is the current one on
Yeah, yes. So that's actually page 6 of the PDF. So,
it looks like this.
construction inspection and testing, steel girder fabrication, plant inspection, in accordance with the advertised RFQ. Do we have a copy of the advertised RFQ in here by any chance?
I can get it to you.
So effectively, does this include contract administration in terms of managing the paperwork for this type of a project?
Correct. So this project, because we have CDOT funding, we have to follow all of their paperwork requirements, Davis-Bacon, and there's an exorbitant amount of paperwork involved with this grant that we have. So that does include administrative those, on-site interviews, things like that.
Okay. It does not include, I think I heard this morning that it does not include things like construction surveying that will be provided by the contractor. Is that included in the estimate at this point for the construction part of the contract?
Yeah, it's in the bid items. And if you look at, I guess the next agenda item has all those items broken out.
Yeah. And it includes all geotechnical and materials
Correct. Their
testing?
sub is Ye and Associates, who worked on the design as well.
Is it X-ray testing of the welds for the steel fabrication?
The steel fabrication is off-site. It does include a site visit because it's all by America.
Right.
So those have to be inspected at the facility they're being fabricated at.
All right, any further questions for Jessica? All right, thanks, Jessica. At this point, I would open it up to the public for any comments. All right, seeing none, I will bring it back to council for discussion and possible motion.
Mike, can I ask you a quick question? Am I looking at the right thing under where it says current estimate? It had original estimate, and now it says current estimate. Is this where we're at?
$1.49 million. Yeah, what page is that of the PDF?
Well, I don't know.
I'm sorry?
Page 4.
Page 4. I guess I'll just throw out a comment. I understand that this is a complicated project, and with the federal money, it puts us into another level of bureaucracy that is difficult, but it just, I just feel that number is too much.
Yeah, I'm blown away by the number item compared to the total cost of this project. It's, I don't know what we're looking at, 15% or?
It's almost 18%.
18% of the project. I was kind of anticipating that 7% for some reason, but I'm not in the bridge building business, you know.
I guess I would just say I share your concerns. It seems close to 20% of the money we're going to expend on the project to be devoted to, I don't want to say simply management, that may make it sound too simple, but for 20% to be things other than bricks and mortar and actually doing the project seems too high to me.
So can I ask you a question, Carl?
Sure.
Because I have absolutely no idea what an engineer's, or what someone should charge for this. I've never built a bridge of this magnitude. What, is there a way for us to move this forward and talk with this contractor about, you know, these fees and say, look, is there anything at all we can do to bring this in line with what I'm hearing from these guys?
Yeah, I would say that with regard to this, we've engaged, so underneath the RFQ process, you start with whoever scores the highest on the qualification, and you start negotiating with them. I believe we started at 1.8? 1.6 on this project. With this group.
Okay.
And went back and forth on a number of points as to why they chose certain things or didn't choose other things, trying to get an understanding of the numbers involved. My impression of this is kind of a best and final from this contractor. Underneath the rules, and I will get the term of art wrong, it's if we determine that negotiations
have stalled out
that we're done, and I would take that as if you guys reject the number, then underneath the rules we move on to the next qualified and start negotiating with them. That's just kind of how the process works. So from our standpoint, you know, none of us on the staff side have the authority to say we'll accept or fully reject a number. I would say that we have worked on this number. But I think it's up to you guys at this point to decide whether or not that works for you or not. If it doesn't, I guess kind of generally my interpretation of those rules are we move on to the next qualified bidder and start negotiating with them.
And this certainly isn't a hard bid. These are estimates. So along the way, if we decide that you know, we don't really need Joe to come out and look at that girder that day, that's going to be, it would get adjusted just like your fee schedule does.
Correct.
And we're invoiced on a monthly basis, I suppose, or something like that.
And this estimate's based without a contractor schedule. The contractor schedule is going to change what that amount is. And so we can come back with a more set amount once we have determined that. If we move forward with
But
HR.
if we approve this, contractor schedule or not, I mean, we have no ability to really negotiate this down. I mean, other than the goodwill of the consultant. Am I correct in that? In other words, if they see the contractor schedule and say, yeah, we could eliminate this many hours of inspection time or whatever, this inspector for this period of time, but we're still going to stick with our $1.5 million number.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would take it as a not to exceed number, and but inside of that, certainly if there is less time spent on the project than indicated, then the billing should be less than that, but this is definitely a cap on a not to exceed. Like I said, it's not it's an awkward process because normally you guys are seeing kind of hard numbers from multiple bidders. And in this case, we have a number from a bidder because that's the way the process works. So it's...
We can't wait to approve this until after we have bids. We have to approve this before we can go out to bid.
This is one of the pieces we have to have in place for construction management before CDOT will sign off on us letting this out to bid.
We need their help during the bidding process. It's pretty important to have them on board before we go to bid. And Joe may want to speak to those numbers, but in our discussions, they certainly aren't going to overstaff this project. This is, they want to have enough money that they can have enough staffing, but it's not going to be just people idly standing by. And we have some say in that.
Is it appropriate to hear from Joe?
Yeah, I think so. This is actually I mean, because of the structure of the thing, it's a negotiation, although I will say ultimately you guys need to make a decision on this bidder, and if you want to move on to the next one. Right. You get to decide when negotiations are over, I guess is what I'm telling you.
And this is an extremely complex and technical project. I know it's just a bridge, but a bridge slide is not common in this area. We do need a lot of technical assistance with that. There's a combination soil nail and micropile wall for the abutments, which is kind of an innovative design. So there's a lot of complexities to this project.
And we will be keeping an eye on it.
I'll be out there a lot.
We're doing the whole slide thing. I don't know if this is a more expensive process or not, but for time saving, correct? So that that Sunlight Bridge is down for as few a days as possible?
Mm-hmm. Right. When we went through the structural selection report, there were 3 options presented to the council and the community. The slide was the mid-price option at that point. And a lot of it had to do with timing, and a lot of it also had to do with permanent impacts to the neighboring residences. We wanted to make sure that we weren't moving traffic closer to them and affecting their living.
I got a pretty random question, but how were the evaluators chosen? I see that there were 3 city staff members, 1 county road and bridge superintendent, and a CDOT representative. I'm just curious, how was that chosen?
So when we originally went for the design, I involved CDOT, Pete Lombardi, and in this process. He was our grant administrator at that point. So I wanted some involvement from him. And we involved the county because the county does have some sort of a stake in this project. Not with funding at this point, yeah. And so I wanted to continue that with this review. The reason why I asked the assistant county manager to participate, he didn't have timing, so Wyatt was the next on the list after Frank. And then the CDOT reviewer, he is the local agency construction management coordinator. I went to a training with him, and I felt that he was able to speak to the requirements of construction management and evaluate the construction management proposals better than anyone else. He has about 30 years of experience, I believe.
So Jessica, as I understand it, we won't know what the company who had 1 point less than HDR had. We won't know what their offer was. And, that seems kind of, in a public spirit, not your doing, nobody's doing really in particular, but it seems kind of disingenuous that out of 184 possible points, that 1 point would prevent, a deliberative body spending public money from knowing what the second place bidder was, what they offered. And, I don't know if it's a great difference. There's probably nothing we can do about it, but, this is why sometimes local government is broken.
Rick, and to be fair, it's federal requirements, not local. We didn't have any other choice. We just had to negotiate with the most qualified company.
And to the point, it's not that you don't know what the second place bidder would have bid on this. I don't. None of us do because we haven't talked to them. It was a request for qualifications and then a negotiation on the price after that qualified bidder was selected. So I have no idea what.
Sure.
And it's my understanding from Ricky that if we were to push HDR out of the runnings and move on to the next qualified person, we can't change our mind later. We would be stuck with
Understand.
every, and they could come back at a way higher amount too. I mean, we won't know.
You know, and it's just the vagaries of the fact that everybody from the city ranked the second place bidder higher than the people who were invited in from outside the city. So, you know, and I trust my staff, so, anyway, here we are.
Do we,
I have a question.
Not always
Oh,
the
sorry.
transparency you'd like to see, is there?
Shelley, go ahead.
I have a question because I don't know the numbers and percentages. So what is, on a project like this, what's kind of a standard level of construction management cost?
So the number that I believe I presented throughout this whole project is 20% of the construction costs. And that was based on the previous construction estimate, so it was around 1.58 million.
So that's kind of standard on these projects?
Yeah.
And with this being a more complex bridge project with the slide and the wall, the retaining walls, and then also to meet the federal requirements
There's a lot of
that we
paperwork.
have for reporting. So do you feel like this is out of scale then, or?
Based on
if we're around 18%?
Yeah, I mean, based on what I've held, it's within that range, so.
Okay, thanks.
You think that's typical for a bridge project?
You know, I don't know. I tried to do some research on the CDOT's budgeting process, and their construction management, from what I could find online, ranges between 5% and 35%.
Yeah.
And it just depends on the year and what projects are being involved. Certainly Grand Avenue, I think, would have a higher percentage because it is a more complex project. So
Right.
I think it just depends on the type of bridge being used and how much involvement from their staff there is. You know, certainly isn't a project that, even if we had the staffing, we could
The
manage ourselves.
expertise.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I would hope that they didn't spend $25 million on management for the Grand Avenue Bridge project.
I'm sure they
Don't
did.
know.
I bet they
They
did.
spent a lot.
But that's my,
We're all outside of our field of expertise.
well, in my experience, I understand this is not your standard road pipe civil project. But it's a fairly standard structure. I understand it's a slide in. My opinion, this shouldn't exceed 12%. That's my own opinion. And I understand that when you're dealing with bureaucracies like CDOT and federal regulations, you know, that increases the time. But I'm personally just not comfortable moving forward with these numbers. I mean, I don't like the process. I understand the process is what the process is. We're stuck with the process. You know, but I guess I want to negotiate, I guess, or I want to.
But my understanding, I mean, I see Joe sitting here. I don't know if that's appropriate to.
I mean, I think if you guys wanted to put out a number that you were comfortable, or if you wanted to move on to the next bidder, I mean, those are kind of your options. Recognizing that whatever you do, I'll probably ask you to come back next week and approve something, because we need to get this in place before we go out to bid in 2 weeks.
Hopefully, as long as FHWA
we might
gets their
be
review done.
worse off. I mean,
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't
We don't
know for sure on that.
But the first step before going to bidder number 2 is we could have further discussions with the current
If
bidder.
you wanted to continue this and direct staff to see if they could get the number down, I don't, you know, you might ask Joe if he thought he could bring that number down. We have pushed back on this number, like I said, and shaved a couple $100,000 off. I don't know where that would go. You know, I don't know if it's an awkward thing, but, you know, if you want, you know, you could give us a number you're comfortable at, or a percentage, or tell us to go back and come back with the best number we could in 3 days.
Can we
Can we hear from Joe?
Yeah, can we hear from Joe?
Okay. Joe, why don't you, go ahead and sell us on your number, Joe, or,
have I got a deal for you? Hi, Joe Elson, and I'm with HDR Engineering. I'm the project manager, and I'll be the professional engineer in responsible charge on the project. The site is 1.2 miles from my house in South Glenwood. And I'm glad that there was discussion about a qualifications based, I think, in our proposal. You know, basically our team is, you know, it's 2.5 of the people that worked on the Grand Avenue Bridge, another guy that I worked in Glenwood Canyon with for 11 years. We're all local. The only per diem charges or travel charges are the person that would fly out to wherever the plant, the fabrication plant, ends up being probably Salt Lake City. But, you know, I think if you took any of the other teams from, especially the number 2, they would all be out of the Front Range, really, and, you know, that could be a couple $100,000 easily if you use CDOT, you know, CONUS rates. But, yeah, this is certainly not a best and final offer. You know, we've had a couple of discussions. When we were putting our numbers together, it was going to be a Schedule A plus B contracting method where the contractor does a hard bid and then they bid the number of days, and there's your staff would put a monetary value on what each working day is worth, and actually calendar days, and whoever can, then you sum those 2 columns, so whoever can do it in the least amount of time, you know, with the best price, that's who gets awarded. And I've got a lot of experience. I did the very first Schedule A plus B project on the 2004 emergency rockfall in Glenwood Canyon. It really gets the attention, but you get contractors that work really long days, so that's the way that we set up our cost estimate, was basically from sunlight to dark that the contractor would be working. And in our discussions, we pulled our two main inspectors back to 9-hour days, and knowing that we could shift them, we could have one start early and the other one start later to match the end. But, you know, since we've had the pricing discussions, that is a change, and we can definitely shave some cost. Plus, we don't know, like Jessica mentioned, we don't have the contractor schedule. We figured it for working right through the winter. They might, it depends on what the winter's like, but if there's a winter shutdown, there won't be any of our people out there, so.
Sure.
Oh, go ahead.
Do you really think you'll ever need 2 inspectors on the site at one time?
You know, there's going to be operations going on each side with the ground nail walls and shoring and with micropile. You know, the RFQ said 1 to 2 inspectors, so we figured 2 to be safe. You know, that's, in working 30 years for CDOT, it's a lot easier to kind of start with like, this is the max, and then, you know, on all the contracts that we do with CDOT, it's always a discussion with the owner of like, you know, this person is extra, we're gonna, you know, get rid of them. So, you know, it's flexible. It's a not to exceed number. It's not, this is our number, this is our best and final offer number. You know, there's plenty of room to talk, so.
So Joe, how do we, or Carl, whoever needs to answer this, how do we get to the best and final number? I mean, it seems like an odd place to negotiate with you. You're one of a lot of folks here in this group. I don't know if you're the one to be negotiating with, but I feel really comfortable with the people that are involved in your group. I mean, they're all local. I mean, I know some of them, I trust them, so I just felt really good when you told me who was on your team. I think it just comes down to how do we get to what's our best number for the town of Glenwood Springs for your company to be the engineer on this, or to be the construction manager. I'm sorry.
It's like Jessica mentioned, until we get a contractor schedule. I mean, that's what you need us out there to do, is to cover that contractor. So, man to man or zone, you know, it's kind of a, you know, it's really about getting the quality, you know, and, you know, like the accelerated bridge construction, the ABC specialist that we have, he lives up 3 Mile. I don't know if you know Norm Kirk. He has worked for contractors and designed these actual slides before, you know. probably his commute and mine will be on bike, especially if South Midland's ripped up at the same time, so.
So Carl, if we come up with a go-ahead number tonight, say not to exceed X, but we'd like to negotiate with these folks to get a contract with them.
Well, yeah, and I was going to say what you could do. I was just thinking my way. That's why I was doing math. I'm not my strong suit. Hence the calculator. Is if you wanted to approve a not to exceed tonight to be able to advance this, and then
I think we want to advance
you know, with the idea that we can come back and reconsider that once the contractor schedule is in place. If you wanted to use, you know, Mayor had thrown out a 12% number, which would be roughly 1.1 million. I mean, that would be one way to go.
I might suggest I don't know. Seems to me if engineering is telling us could run higher percentage, I was thinking maybe a 15% would kind of split that difference, but I don't know what that number would be.
Would you guys mind if I asked Joe a question? Joe, you've been building bridges. You've been part of bridge work, this kind of work for a long time. What is your experience in percentage-wise on this, if you don't mind me asking?
No, that's a great question. When I was the program engineer for CDOT, the Bridge Enterprise program, that's what funded, you know, a large part of the Grand Avenue Bridge. I also had 6 other bridges, and all of those were direct to project costs. So it would be the same thing. It would either be our staff from CDOT or a consultant, and it was always a construction engineering number plus the indirects, which we don't have time to go into the CDOT indirects, but on these, especially the smaller the bridge, you know, some of these bridges weren't that big. They'd be like $5 or $7 million bridges, and my CE number would be like 40%, which if you cut it in half down to the construction engineering, that would be over 20%. But it's just because of the things that you have to do, you know, the people that it takes to put a bridge in with all the foundation elements. You've got a lot of utility moves on this. It's a really complicated utility thing, especially with trying to get the sanitary sewer to stay live and be detoured around while the bridge slide is going on. I think it would be a little bit short-sighted to just say, here's a number, hit it, because then you're kind of really undoing all the good of the Brooks Act of, you know, qualifications-based. I think it's really going to hinge on the schedule from the contractor, and you know, I think we can take a look at this number now, knowing that it's not the Schedule A plus B, and I'll bet we can find some room I know we can find room to get down, but I would be a little wary about just saying, oh, here's the number, or here's the percent, until you really know.
That's what I'm worried about. I mean, I'm worried that we say this is the number, we can't hit it, and now we're starting over. We might actually end up in a worse position with folks from Denver who, at least maybe I don't feel comfortable with. I don't know about the rest of you guys, but.
No, I agree.
I guess what I was suggesting on a number was kind of a conditional approval of this at a not to exceed number. I mean, I think gives us direction on negotiation. I also want to see a construction schedule.
Yeah, and then, I mean, if not, I'm not saying that we necessarily agree to it, but if the construction schedule, let's just throw out and say, even if we took 15%, the base construction estimate here is $8.329 million, if I'm not mistaken. 15% of that is $1.25 million. That would be a $250,000 savings over what we're looking at here. I still think that that's too high, but that's my own opinion. If we were to approve a not to exceed for 1.25 million, and then we get the construction schedule back, and Joe and his group go, nope, we're back to 1.5 because of the way the construction schedule is set up. What then? I guess
we can amend the contract to reflect that.
We're not. We're not starting over.
No, we're not starting over. Okay. I mean, I think that, you know, I mean, I guess part of this is trying to get a comfort level for you guys that you're not throwing out a number that is at so far the outside that you know, how sometimes we just work to that budget number. I guess my suggestion is that we work to a lower one, and if we need to move it up, then we move it up.
That number makes me real comfortable with you guys. Now, whether or not you can hit it or not, and it sounds like if we say that number tonight and you just can't hit it and you come back to us, we at least get a second shot to say, okay, or, all right, let's move on, right? So, just so everyone knows, I'm okay with that number if we want to get there.
Yeah, I don't know anything about numbers or how to build a bridge, or it's so easy for me to sit here and go, I don't want to pay more than $1 million. But, you know, how that relates to reality. I do know one thing. I'd rather have Joe Elson standing in front of me than anybody else I know. He's been a part of this community for a long time, 25 years that I've been around him, and I think he'd represent us well, so.
Yep,
Thank you.
I agree. So I don't know if we can come up with a number that works.
Joe, do you feel like,
Everybody, but-
is that a number you can take back to your group and work with and see if you can?
Yeah, I did the estimates.
Okay, all right.
I brought my computer. No,
So, should we, I don't know if we need to open this up to the public, or are we coming back for?
We probably should. Is there anyone from the public? Christian, you're the only public left?
No, I might as well speak.
Is this your number?
I would really, obviously, Christian Henney, Hotel Colorado, 526 Pine Street. I would really like to thank you guys for the thoughtfulness that's going on this process, that, you know, an important infrastructure that's going to cost the city millions of dollars, that it's not just a check the box, you know, gut doesn't feel good, don't like it, check the box, let it go. Complimenting a local man that you have trust in, you know, that carries a lot of water. So as the public here right now, I'd just like to say I think the process is being well represented. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Christian.
So do we have that number?
Yeah,
it's
1,250,000 is the 15%.
15% works out to actually 1,249,000 and change, but
just
250,000.
Let's round it
I
off.
think we can go to 1.25 million. I'll give you the extra $14.37.
So, Carl, what would be the motion language? Because
I think really what you guys, let me get back to my agenda.
Because if you say we approve the award of the bid, I mean, the bid was more than what we're giving it for, do we go ahead and just do it that way?
Really, I mean, you're approving the contract. There was an estimate attached to that remembering that this is not a hard bid environment that we're working in necessarily.
Right.
I think what I would do is approve the construction management contract in an amount not to exceed 1.25 million. Subject to, you know, if we're willing to renegotiate that price, but not the provider, based on the construction schedule once we have it in place. And you could say so moved.
Do you want to do that?
So moved.
So moved.
I second
Because it might
that.
have to repeat it.
I'll second that.
I wasn't listening close enough. I apologize. So we have a motion by Todd and a second by Steve to
That cost you a beer.
I'm good with that.
approve the contract
To
with HDR Engineering for an amount not to exceed $1.25 million. Is that fair enough at that point?
Right.
Subject
With
to.
recognizing that once the construction schedule is back,
We will-
that number may need to be revised either up or down.
Okay.
And as part of the
So recognize.
services being provided, so the construction schedule comes from the contractor. Or part of the services being provided here would be if the construction schedule seems to be resulting in more effort, whether it be project management or otherwise, would the services be go back to the contractor and say, we don't like your construction schedule and we think this can be done?
I mean, a big part of what Jessica was talking about, needing to get these guys on board, is to help with that process, the bid process, working through those issues. And so essentially what the motion does is hire these guys, puts a cap on the contract for now until we know more about the live on the ground conditions.
Yeah. And we're involved in that as well.
Correct. Great.
Is that fair enough? Okay.
That works?
Okay. All right, everyone understand the motion? All right, let's go ahead and call the question.
Ingram, yes. Davis, yes. Gamba, yes. Leahy, yes. Voorhees, yes. Kelp, yes. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Jim.
You thought we were going sideways
Jessica.
on you, didn't you?
Sometimes we go backwards, so forget sideways.
We were swimming.
Backstroke.
Continue to.
Thanks for all your help on the Grand Avenue Bridge,
Yes.
too. It came out just awesome. Yeah, yeah, it was fun working with you on that. Thanks,
All
Joe.
right, thanks. So next item is agenda item 20, 27th Street Bridge approval to go to bid for the project construction. It's kind of odd wording, but that's what it says. So I guess we're approving the project to go to bid. Is that?
Pretty much.
All right.
I just,
So moved.
So, that was easy. So we've gotten our bid documents back from Wood. They've been evaluated by CDOT. They just got sent to FHWA on Tuesday. FHWA has a minimum of 2-week review, and then once they've given us our okay, we could go ahead and issue the bid at that time. So rather than coming back afterwards and delaying it even more.
Okay. This actually doesn't have to do with this particular item, but I'm going to ask the question anyway to Deborah, who's really not paying attention.
Deborah. Question.
I know that, you know, we're essentially, well, funding, I guess, is still going to be somewhat determined, but we have this list of all these great grants. We got the FHWA off-system bridge grant, we got a DOLA grant, we got an FMLD grant. Have we exhausted every grant opportunity on this project other than funding from some other fellow jurisdictions?
I don't know if I can say we've exhausted every potential grant opportunity, but we're kind of moving on to other projects. You know, we could have, if we could have waited a little longer, we could have tried to throw this one into the Build America grant. Once again, though, it's so hard to get that one, it didn't seem worth the, so.
Or the risk.
Are there funds out there we could pursue? Maybe, but we're also pursuing them for other very important projects.
And I guess to build off of that, I was encouraged by CDOT to pursue additional off-system bridge funding through CML FHWA. And we applied for a supplemental fund last year. It was ultimately denied because we didn't go through the formal submittal process, and the board didn't feel that it would be fair to take funds away from people who spent the time on a formal submittal. But they did encourage us to reapply this year, and I do plan on submitting another application.
Any idea what that amount might possibly be?
You know, they threw out the number of $500,000 is what they were comfortable with. I don't know if that would be different. I actually submitted 3 separate applications for them to evaluate, and the hope was that CDOT would have some extra money left over, and in the reconciliation process, there were apparently some funds that weren't accounted for, and they didn't wind up having any extra funding to throw at this. So.
And I think we are going to ask the utilities to contribute a couple $100,000 as well. We don't have that in there, but I've mentioned it before, and I think we're going to do that through the budgeting process.
Do we have water and sewer on that bridge? Or?
Yes, the water and sewer and
electric.
We are installing conduit for fiber eventually.
And all the new utilities will be on the pedestrian bridge, is that correct?
No, the sanitary sewer and the electric and fiber optic will remain on the traffic bridge. The sanitary sewer is quite flat through there and has a very large capacity, so there was no way to move it to the pedestrian bridge, but the water and the gas will be relocated there.
Okay.
I think we were looking about for $500,000 from utilities.
In total?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was a little bit more.
That's one of the reasons why we're running out of money, and we're now making utilities help contribute to these projects because it is a part of it.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a side note, but I would like to thank our staff and Deborah and your staff for applying for these grants. I know they're hard to do because you feel like maybe you're wasting your time, but you're putting in that work. But I tell you what, the first 5 years I was on council, I don't think we applied for any grants.
No.
I kept asking, why don't we apply for grants? We got a great narrative here. We actually have a very good narrative because of there's just the whole way Glenwood sits in here and the transportation issues we have. And we seem to be applying for anything we have a chance for. So I appreciate the time and effort to go after these things and to get some help. And we're being successful. So, because I don't think we used to do that, at least not the first part of my council
We'll
term.
have to make the ask to get
And
that.
they're hard to do because you feel like, gosh, you could be wasting your time by not getting anything. But you know what you're going to get if you don't ask. And
Nothing.
so,
Right.
I just appreciate the time. And it's hard to spend your time when you don't know if there's anything at the end of the rainbow.
Well, and in general, most of the applications we've made, people have been supportive of whether or not we got funding.
I think out there in the state, people like helping Glenwood. I mean, we've got a good narrative up here. It's a good town.
Can I ask a question? I just want to make sure I understand what I'm looking at here in terms of the numbers. So we're now saying with construction management and everything thrown in, it's about $10 million. And 2.5 of that is currently covered by these three, by CDOT and the 2 grants. So
Correct.
we're down to about $7.5 million we have to cover either through our own ability to fund A&I bonding or what have you, or through the county's contribution.
With about $500,000 from utilities as well.
Okay.
And possibly another $500,000 from FHWA, right?
Yeah, I think that grant application isn't until November, but they said they would consider it.
Okay.
And generally speaking, CML funding might be different because they're already invested, but usually once you're out to bid, you can't really go after more grant funding because it's got to be in the bid. Like all the requirements need to be baked into the bid.
Since we already have funding through them, those are already built in, so I think they're willing to consider it. I don't know whether they're willing to fund it.
Yeah.
Hopefully we will get funding from the county. We intend to ask. We just can't promise we'll get it.
Right. It would be great if they could step up as partners in this. It's an important county bridge.
It started as a county bridge, actually. It was originally built as a county bridge. Shelley, your light is flashing.
I am ready to make a motion.
There you go.
If you
Okay.
guys are ready.
Sure.
I would move to approve
I haven't actually opened it up to the
Christian,
public
do you have
yet.
anything to say about that?
have you not yet?
I do not.
All right.
Okay.
Joe, did you want to say anything? All right. Okay. So I'll close it to public comment and bring it back to council for a motion.
So I would move to approve to proceed with the invitation to bid for the 27th Street Bridge project. And
Second.
let the games begin.
Yeah, second.
All right, we have a motion by Shelley and a second by Todd to approve that we proceed with the invitation to bid on the 27th Street Bridge project. Any further discussion? Let's call the question.
This is working well tonight.
Ingram, yes. Davis, yes. Gamba, yes. Leahy, yes. Voorhees, yes. Help, yes. Motion passes.
Thank you.
All right.
And
Yeah,
Sherry.
thanks.
It's exciting to see
never
this
did like this
move
project.
forward.
One last comment, I guess, for our engineering and/or procurement staff. What can we do to get more bidders? I mean, this is a $10 million project, and it seems like we ought to be able to get some interest from quite a few people, even perhaps out of state. Is it too small for someone to come in from out of state?
We have been working on that.
So we have had a substantial amount of interest in this project already. I know Hamilton, Gould is very interested in it. They want to pair with the Bridge Slide team. I'm trying to think of RL and Granite are both interested. So I think the word is out there and people are interested and we will be contacting as many expert people as we can. So.
Great.
Thank you. Hopefully we get good bids.
Yes.
Hopefully, if I can just add a comment before we move on, I don't know how we sort of communicate with the community and their citizens in terms of, some of these monumental things that we're doing. I mean, this is a fairly monumental thing. I'm always struck by speaking with people, let's say in the South Glenwood, who have no idea to the commitments we've made about South Midland or 27th Street Bridge. I even listened to, the chair of our Chamber of Commerce say, you haven't done anything on these A&I things, and yet we've done a lot. And so there seems to be a gap in terms of understanding in the community between, the commitments we're making to spend substantial amount of money on these important projects in South Glenwood and the community's knowledge of what we're doing. And so I just sort of throw it out to all of us to give some thought. Is there a better way for us to communicate so people know that we are in fact acting upon the, the measure they passed on A&I, and we're acting upon our promises to make these substantial improvements in their communities?
So Jen suggested I mention that the construction contract does include a substantial amount for public information for this project. Coming off of Grand Avenue Bridge, we want to do the best that we can. We have high expectations from the community, and we want to live up to those.
Great. And I can also say Sarah's beginning to work on a newsletter. We could include, with the idea of getting this stuff out electronically. And, we could even do, I've seen it before where, where sales tax is approved. Like, we could make up a little sign that says, like, your A&I dollars at work, and stick them in the ground when we're working on a project. Yes. It's just be more expensive.
Larger than the FMLD.
Right, exactly, because we're going to have to put that out on the job site.
And that, Jessica, that public information officer or campaign is part of the contractor's contract bid package as well, so that's not additional cost to us. The one thing we learned about building bridges is it costs us a lot more, us as a city, than what we ever thought it would.
Bridges are not cheap.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely not cheap.
And it's all of these little, they got you here and they get you there, and the next thing you know, you spend another $1 million.
That's why we selected a very competent construction management team to control those costs.
Okay, Joe.
That's their job. And we like to do ribbon cuttings now. We might even get you scissors that work one day.
Oh,
Yeah.
great.
That would be, going against tradition. So, usually we got to hack at it.
Bring a chainsaw.
Decide.
And something we learned with Grand Avenue is setting more milestones, being able to hit those even after the bridge is slid into place. There are other smaller milestones to be hit. So
I think the bridge slide operation could be a great community viewing or something. So that might
Rivers
be a
has
fun
a deck.
Yes.
It's got a great, and so does Deborah's house.
I also have a deck. I'm moving out.
But can we get beer on your deck?
We do usually have a good selection of beer.
All right.
Like a ship christening, and you slam the bottle of champagne.
Right.
Well,
Joe will schedule that for like 3 in the morning. So.
The information
Matt out there pushing
campaign,
the
if
bridge
you
into
will,
place.
to me, there's interaction between, the public understanding what things we are doing in the city and their neighborhoods, and any other requests we might have of the public. So, we've been talking about a street tax, and, whether it's this fall, next spring, whenever it is, I think, particularly for the citizens who live in South Glenwood, if we want to make that request of them and they don't understand that we've committed to spend about $20 million in South Glenwood to improve that infrastructure, and I think that's going to impact their receptiveness to a potential street tax. So we need to get that word out before we begin having interactions and discussions with them about the street tax, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
But something like that doesn't need to be, a 6-page press release. It could be just a paragraph that goes out and says, at last night's council meeting, the city council approved the bidding process for the 27th Street Bridge. End of story. And
the Post did call me this morning, so. The Post did call me this morning, so I anticipate an article about it tomorrow.
That'd be good.
Since Davis has the Memorial Tunnel and the Steve Davis Memorial Pad Bridge, can I get a name at some point?
The Todd Leahy restrooms.
There we go. I want a memorial restroom. I like that idea.
Got to be buried under the toilet, though.
I'll get the north and south naming rights. North and south.
All right. Okay. Any further comments on that item?
Did we vote?
We did.
We did vote.
A while ago. Yeah.
Passed.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we need to pressure you guys more.
All right, so we'll move on. Agenda item 21, urban renewal services. I have a presentation by Jen.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I'm here this evening to present two related items. The first is an agreement with Glenwood Springs Mall LLC for advanced funds to cover associated costs with urban renewal services from Ricker Cunningham for $25,000. The second is authorization for the city to enter into an agreement with Ricker Cunningham for those urban renewal services in an amount not to exceed $25,000. Both of these items are in service to furthering redevelopment of the mall. The parameters for establishing an urban renewal authority are set forth in Colorado Revised Statutes Title 31, which spells out the need for a study of conditions referred to as a blight study or a condition survey to determine whether at least 4 of the 11 factors of blight are present. With that, I'm open to any questions that you might have.
Thanks. This isn't a question, but just perhaps a note for the general public. This is a request by the owner of the mall to create an urban renewal district out of the mall area to redevelop the mall so that it can be better than it currently is and perhaps start increasing its sales tax revenue that it generates for the city. And that owner is funding the full cost of this service contract. So this is not costing the city much other than Jen's time at this point, and perhaps some of Carl's time.
Yeah, a little bit here and there.
Yeah.
It definitely is a bonus. I mean, this is a great example of trying to have somebody who's trying to figure out a way to redevelop kind of paying their own way instead of asking the city to foot that bill in total. So it's a good starting point.
Right. All right, any questions for Jen?
Just a comment.
I'm sorry, Shelley?
Shelley's
Yep.
Jen, could you just explain, kind of for the benefit of the public too, what will be the process once we get this analysis back? What will be the next steps?
So maybe I'll just go a little bit through all of the steps. There's the data gathering and field investigation that Ricker Cunningham would conduct at the site. They would do some mapping and issue that final condition survey report, and then that information would need to we would use it to develop an urban renewal plan, and that would go to the Planning Commission to determine whether or not it's that it meets the desires and the intent of our comprehensive plan, and then it would come to City Council for an adoption. So we can set out that schedule for you. I don't have that yet from Ricker Cunningham. We wanted to get this piece underway, and then we can provide you that information of exactly those meeting dates. Okay, there's also some noticing requirements. In this case, it's just an urban renewal authority consideration for a single property owner. It could be for many property owners. In this case, the property owner is already noticed, as they're the folks who've approached us about this, but there are some other noticing requirements that we need to do.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Shelley. Rick?
Yeah, Jen, will there be like an advisory group then that'll sort of ride herd on this after this first initial step is over? And, can you riff on that for a minute?
Sure. If there were to be an established urban renewal authority, then there would be a board. It would be an urban renewal authority similar to your downtown development authority. It's a separate entity under the state. If there were to be, as there is for the DDA, a TIF, a tax increment financing component, there would need to be representatives from the other taxing districts that would be affected. So it would be a school board seat, a county seat, and then a seat that would represent all of the other special districts. So it's a single seat for the other districts.
So if once this group comes together and starts making decisions and the council doesn't agree with that, where would you see all of that going?
It's a separate board. So if it were to be council plus the 3 seats, it would be just a city council. It would be the majority would rule. It's a separate board, just as your DDA board is a separate board. It could be that city council plus the 3 seats is the board. It could be, you could have a separate citizens board as you do with the DDA.
Yeah, in this particular instance, my recommendation, if we move forward on it, will be the council plus 3. That resolves a lot of majority issues and some of the other issues that can crop up.
And we will start talking, if this is approved, we'll start talking to the other potential members who would sit on the seat, just so they're not taken unaware.
So just a non-judgmental comment. When I look at this agenda, you know, I had to listen to what Mike said about, you know, who was going to pay what and sort of what the intent was. And if I was sitting out in West Glenwood, as I occasionally do, and if I read this, you know, I wouldn't understand just what Mike pointed out to us. And I don't know if there's a way of sharpening that up a little bit, or, you know, the title says Urban Renewal Services, and if I'm a member of the public, you know, that probably doesn't mean too much either. If we might have tack on like West Glenwood Mall there, or West Glenwood, or however that is. And I think that just kind of gets back to some things that Jim was saying, you know, a little bit earlier in terms of making sure, you know, that the public is sort of kind of knows, you know, what's up and where the money's going and who's paying for what. So just a comment on the agenda item. So thank you for indulging me.
Thanks, Rick. What if there are some adjacent properties to the mall and further up Melray Road that are perhaps be careful how I say this.
I think what you're trying to say is that if there are other properties that choose to or would like to join the urban renewal district, they can do that by petitioning in, but it would also require a study to determine that they in fact qualify.
So if that, is it possible, have we approached any of those properties?
Not at this time, primarily because this specific property owner had asked for this specific mechanism.
Okay.
So I think we want to go over the first hump of getting this study back, and then perhaps have that conversation.
Would it be another $25,000 to get one
well,
of those other properties?
You know, I think it depends on the scope. Probably something along those lines. You know, this is going to get a lot more complicated if we start going out there and noticing property owners, because unfortunately the title of one of these studies is a blight study, and property owners tend to get twitchy when you say that.
Right.
Unless they're, you know, unless it's something that they really want to participate in, has been my experience.
Elray's kind of one of those roads that kind of likes what they have, because that's why they're there. And you're right, you would have a hard time getting agreement from.
Yeah, and I just don't think that there's any reason to rile. I mean, we just aren't at that point where it makes any sense yet.
Start here as the catalyst to see where this goes.
And we didn't want to risk this.
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of them like what they have out there. If those little small commercial sites are hard to find.
Yeah.
If I may, it would require a condition survey for those properties. It would require an urban renewal plan amendment. It's probably a plan amendment that could be drafted by the city attorney's office, potentially. And I would say that the other pieces of that, that only those properties that are within the city boundary, the corporate boundary, would be eligible. My understanding is that there are some properties that are there that are in the county.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Any further questions for Jen? Thanks, Jen. Anyone in the public like to comment on this? No. All right. Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council for, now, do we need 2 motions on this item? 2 separate motions, or can we include them in one motion?
I think I'm fine if you include them in one motion.
So we need a motion to both approve the agreement, or approve or deny the agreement with Glenwood Springs Mall LLC for advance funds to cover the cost for the urban renewal services from Ricker Cunningham. And then we also need to authorize the city to enter into an agreement with Ricker Cunningham for the outlined urban renewal services.
I move. Just what you said, mate.
Okay.
For the record.
Does that work for you, Carl?
I'll read it in further detail.
Right. No, I was going to say, I think just as long as we have a motion to approve,
Okay, both of
the
those.
services contract as well as the advanced, fee advance contract.
I think you actually said it pretty well, and Rick jumped in there, so
Okay.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion by Rick and a second by Todd. The motion is to approve the agreement with Glenwood Springs Mall LLC for advanced funds to cover associated costs for urban renewal services from Ricker Cunningham for an amount not to exceed $25,000 and authorize the city to enter into an agreement with Ricker Cunningham for the outlined urban renewal services. Any further discussion? Let's call the question.
Ingram, yes. Davis, yes. Gamba, yes. Leahy, yes. Voorhees, yes. Kelp, yes. Motion passes.
All right. Next item is ordinance number 20, series of 2018, and ordinance of the City Council of the City of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, amending Article 020030 of the Glenwood Springs Municipal Code by the addition of Section 020030.120 to provide terms and conditions for limited electronic participation by members of City Council at City Council meetings. This is a first reading.
Thank you. This is going to be really short. You guys asked that we draft something to allow electronic participation. Try to provide just some general ideas with that. It's really up to you what you want to do with it. I'm not particularly attached or not attached to anything in here. This is really a document. It's a self-regulation document, if you will. So it's up to you guys.
And this is, if you will, legally defensible. I know we're not. This is not for land use.
So let me go back and just the city charter obviously was adopted in, I believe, 1965, which predated, well, not the telephone, maybe slightly ahead of the automobile. No,
rotary phones.
Yeah, it was still rotary phones. So there is some language in the charter that about council participation and attendance, and the operative word really there is attendance at meetings. There has been an interest by several of you, because I know that a number of you travel for work and other reasons a fair amount, for some mechanism to be able to electronically participate in council meetings and vote, which I think is the distinction. We've had council members participate for a number of years in work sessions via telephone or Skype or whatever. But because of the charter and the current code just doesn't really define attendance, and I would argue probably in 1965 attendance, they probably were thinking live, because technology didn't allow somebody to attend a meeting meaningfully in some other fashion. This is kind of an interpretation and then setting some guidelines as to how that would be used. There are two kind of exclusions that I have left in here. One that I feel pretty strongly about, the other one is more of a mechanics issue as to wherever you happen to be sitting at the time that you're calling in or coming in Skype. The first is not allowing you to participate in a quasi-judicial hearing. And I think the biggest reason for that is that we've seen that there is a struggle even in council chambers to see and hear all of the evidence that's being presented in a meaningful fashion. And so particularly where I view it as a problem is, say, on a 4-3 decision, and we get challenged on a 106 in terms of procedure, that council member that was absent that voted on it really didn't fully participate, didn't have an opportunity to hear all the evidence, whatever. It's a challenge we don't need to open ourselves up for, I don't think. Obviously, if you guys make a different choice, you can. The other one was excluding executive sessions, and I don't feel that strongly about it, and I think it might have been somebody on council who suggested that be included as an exclusion. The issue being is, are you in a place where privilege is maintained? Are you in your hotel room, or are you trying to do it,
Airport terminal.
An airport terminal.
With people walking by.
With people walking by and things like that. Have we maintained the integrity of that executive session? And so I think that is more I don't have a super strong feeling about that, but it does place a great deal of responsibility on the person phoning in or Skyping in about maintaining that privilege.
I believe you have a section in here too that says you have to have participated in all of the other meetings.
Right, and that was something just in the general conversation. I think there was some on council. I got the impression that people didn't want you to just like cherry pick the issue you wanted to show up for that part of the meeting for. because you wanted to have a voice in that. It was to fully participate in the day's proceedings.
Yeah.
So does that mean that if I want to participate, I think I've missed perhaps one meeting in 7 years and 4 months and however many days it's been, so.
You missed two. Both of them involved bows and arrows and.
Oh, did they? Okay, so maybe I missed two. All right. So I may not take advantage of this myself, but now I lost my whole train of thought.
Whether or not it includes kind of the morning work sessions and,
right.
and all of that. Right. I guess I don't, I think it can be whatever you guys want. I do think that if you're going to participate and vote in a meeting, it probably means that you need to be there from the time that you hit the gavel to start the meeting to the time you hit the gavel to close the meeting. Because there again, I guess it's up to you guys, obviously, if you want to do that or not. I got the impression that you didn't want
to cherry
pick the issues or not be involved in the issues, depending on what they are.
So we could amend that part to say it's sort of from 6 o'clock, hit the gavel to the end, but not include the morning sessions, which oftentimes are not.
Yeah, I mean, I think there again, it's up to you guys. This is your self-regulation.
I would make, again, this is just me, I would make this as difficult as possible to have happen. Because I think it's just super important to be here in the audience and them to see you here making that decision and to read faces, read body language, understand the passion that's in the room, because those are the ones that are going to get this policy in trouble, as the contentious ones. And and those things are always discussed fairly heavily in the morning also. So it's not going to be it's not going to be the easy votes. It's going to be the difficult one that gets us in trouble with this policy. So personally, I think if you just gotta have your vote there, you better participate in the whole day, so that if something comes up, it's defensible that I participated in everything that had to do with that day. I heard everything that we all heard, or whoever was here heard, from legal counsel, whether it's executive session to the morning session to the night. You participated that whole time, because that'll be the one that gets us in a pickle, in my opinion.
Well, it's sort of ironic we don't have anybody here from the public to kind of guide us along. I'm sorry, Chris. You're definitely here.
We have a whole group of staff members out there.
I've been upgraded to staff.
Well, and
they'll put you to work.
But just to say that if we want people here all day, that's not what item F says. It says at other meetings. It doesn't say other meetings happening during that day. And so if we leave that open, it could be any other meeting. It could be happening Wednesday, could be happening on Tuesday, or even down at Doc Holidays or something like that. So if we really want to do that, we should probably insert that. But I think that was put in because of a comment I made about cherry picking, and what I meant was cherry picking the regular meeting, phoning in for one agenda item, or, somehow making contact and then saying, well, that's it, goodbye, or kind of pretending all of a sudden that your connection doesn't work,
Connections.
So what I meant in that context was the whole regular meeting, and I didn't really think about the morning meeting. And I respect what you said about, you need to be here, you need to get the background, but that wasn't quite, I don't think, what I had in mind. This seems to be more of a prohibition, and I know, Todd, that you think maybe it's okay to do that, and and I wouldn't fight that very long. But just a couple other comments are, it says that you need to receive approval, to make a request and receive approval. So who do you make the request to, and who makes the approval? You?
No, the sitting council.
The sitting council.
I think it says that in here. It says that. Okay. It's up there under item 4. The members physically present at the city council meeting make a finding that the requesting member has satisfied the requirements of this section. So basically, if there's 6 of us here and I'm off in the bar in Tahiti or whatever, you guys get to decide whether I've met the intent of items 1, 2, and 3.
So you do that day, or?
I would assume that meeting, at the beginning of that meeting.
I think the layout is, if you look at number 1, the members who desire to participate by telephone or electronic basically provides notice to the city clerk, and that in advance so that they can provide the technical means necessary. And then number 4, just I think at the beginning of the meeting, it would be like excusing somebody's absence, that you would say, you know, met the requirements. Councilor Voorhees will be participating electronically, that, you know, been able to meet the technology, you know, if it's, because sometimes, I mean, I can see, and I think this is where it's that tough one, is like if part of the meeting is going to be presentations and we just aren't there yet, you know, whatever, a PowerPoint, and we're not there yet with what we have available in council chambers because we just aren't there yet. It may not work, and there may be other times when it does. I mean, I think that that's going to have to be part of your budget discussion about what, you know, for right now, I think we're thinking just sticking an iPad up there so that you can see and be seen, right? And that may work for some meetings, it may not for, I don't know. Like I said, I have no idea.
So some poor slob is sitting somewhere half the world away, he'd have to dial in to see whether he could keep on dialing in? Is that kind of what we're thinking?
We'd have to make sure the connection works.
Yeah, I mean, I think
for the approval to even be there, I mean, it seems like, you know, you kind of want to know that maybe ahead of time, or, unless you're a gambling person, you know.
No, but we can't, I mean, presumably, if we have this policy, we're not going to
deny somebody.
Yeah, we're not going to be arbitrary and capricious in our decision-making here about whether or not someone meets it. But we can't take any action outside of an actual meeting. So this would be an action of determining, okay, Rick, yes, you've met these requirements, and so we have to do it during the meeting. So I don't see any other way to do that.
And
unless we hold a special meeting to, you know,
see if you can join the
regular meeting.
And I think you could have faith that it's, you know, it's not going to be unreasonably withheld from anybody. You know, we sort of adopted a policy which said things we're going to be discussing at Thursday City Council meeting need to be in our hands Friday before. So, I mean, I sort of feel like the person who's not physically present probably has all or substantially all of the information available to him or her, you know, many days in advance to be up to speed on the issue. You know, the only maybe question I would have for fellow councilors here would be, would the special circumstances that's there, you know, would that include somebody who's their scheduled vacation? I understand, Todd, what you're saying, but I probably feel about 180 degrees different. And here's why. I would like to, you know, I haven't missed, I don't think, a council meeting, and I don't intend to miss any. But if I had, you know, let's say, you know, if I was younger and this is when my kids ended school and this was the only time we could take vacation, and if I was willing, or a counselor was willing to say, I'm going to give up, you know, one night of that vacation to participate, because I feel being elected, I feel that responsibility to do that. I think we ought to actually encourage that. Now, if we find that this results in a bunch of us being slackers, which I don't think it will, then we'd have to revisit it, in my view. But otherwise, I would encourage council people, if they are, you know, if their schedules permit, and they're so inclined to participate. And I think they will have, you know, all the information that they would need. I agree with the meetings. Personally, I think you could probably do executive session. I think we're responsible enough not to be participating in the airport bar. I do agree with you on the quasi.
Seems awfully quiet.
I agree with you on the quasi-judicial proceedings. So anyway, that's my take, and maybe just ask for reaction. Do you know? Let's say if Jonathan Godey's had been, you know, willing and desiring to participate in this evening's meeting by phone, and he's on vacation, would we be willing to say, yeah, that fits the definition of a special circumstance? I mean, I would.
I would too.
Yeah, my biggest problem with this whole thing, I don't disagree with you, Jim. I think we ought to, you know, allow it for reasonable circumstances, and I'm not opposed for people to do it while they're on vacation. I do think that if someone does it, you know, I kind of like the 2 times a year is enough, you know. I think there is actually, isn't there some requirement that if someone misses, what is it, 4 meetings or something?
It's more than
well,
2
and I'm
in a row.
confusing. Yeah, it's like 3 in a row, I think.
3 in a row.
And here's the other thing, guys, is that I know that you want to participate in everything, but sometimes, and Todd is a good example of that, is that there are meetings that he has missed that he's just said, look, I'm not going to make it. Whatever decision is made while I'm gone is made while I'm gone.
Yeah.
That's the other part of this that, you know, is not, it's not a horrible thing. That's why there's 7 of you and you know, not 2. So.
And that's still a choice even if we pass this. You don't
exactly.
have
I guess that's what I'm saying is that there is, you know, I mean, as somebody who for the better part of 22 years now has scheduled my vacations around the 1 week a month, that every like 6 months that you get that spare week and you don't have a meeting, you know, you just kind of deal with it.
We only get one of those because I keep looking for them.
There's usually 2 a year. There's usually like 2 a year that you get a 3-week break.
Yeah, those are nice.
Otherwise, you just get to work on your vacation.
Yeah.
Right, I feel the same way. If I'm on vacation, I want to be on vacation.
Yeah, my biggest concern is entirely the technology, you know, because part of holding this meeting is I mean, I'm not only just looking at the audience, I'm looking at you guys too, and when I see a scowl on someone's face, I realize that, wow, that is a problem, but if that scowl is facing out to the audience, I don't see Jonathan's scowl on his face, you know, because, you know, the technology is going to be a problem for me, I think. If it was truly like a Skype where I saw Jonathan's face in a little box up here on my video, you know, I'm not trying to like make this more expensive and difficult, but
no, but you raise a fair question, and it's something that I didn't really think about asking as the chair of the meetings. Does this work for you? I mean, you're the one that has the experience running the meeting, and that was one that I hadn't really, frankly, given a ton of thought to, but it does make your job different, and what does work, because you're the one who has the experience sitting in that chair.
Well, I mean, the other technological issue is they're not going to be able to push a button and say, I'd like to speak. So, I mean, that's a simple thing. They can just butt in and I have something to say when it's my turn, kind of a thing. And, you know, and I'll recognize them. But,
you know, and there is like a digital sort of protocol. I mean, you know, I wouldn't necessarily recommend just dropping this on us without, you know, looking at a little training with the technology, maybe a little, you know, 5-10 minute sort of overview about what you can expect, what you couldn't expect. You know, there are whole certificates that are awarded to people. They earn the certificates in digital event management, you know, so it's not like, you know, just shoehorning the technology in the meeting that might change, you know, at least a little bit of behavior, but just knowing what that technology can do and what it can't do. I mean, for instance, with the scowl, you know, Jonathan could send you an emoji, you know, that would pop up on your screen and maybe only your screen. You know?
Yeah, well, and here's where we get into the public nature of what we do, right? In terms of that communication, I mean, I agree with you. You got to figure it out, but you've also got to recognize that it's like, you know, texting while you're on the dais between each other so the public can't hear what you're really talking about, which is prohibited, right? That's not an open meeting.
It is?
Yeah, I've been doing this, you're not going to get a reaction out of me tonight, but thanks. So there are those things that, I mean, this will be a learning process, I guess, is what I'm saying. And so, you know, I guess my suggestion would be is to try something, see how it fits, adjust as you need to, you know,
I mean,
do it in a low-risk environment, if you will.
I'm okay with it. I mean, giving it a shot, but.
Well, you know, the second time that we had this reading, which will be 2 weeks from today, I believe, I will probably offer a couple of motions. One would be to strike the executive session from this procedure. I mean, I don't know completely. I get the quasi-judicial sort of need to be in the room thing, but I don't get the same thing for the executive session. And, you know, if the fear is that a Russian hacker is going to somehow, you know, want to observe what we're doing.
The Chinese, it's not the Russians, but anyway.
Yeah, that's right. What did I say, Russian? But, you know, the idea is that, you know, if somebody's in a crowded sort of situation and you can hear that, you know, they need to make arrangements by hitting a mute button or whatever just to preserve the sort of dialogue that goes on. But, you know, if it's an invasion of secrecy, I'd have a hard time, you know, kind of buying
I guess I will tell you the one that was really easy, and this is one that I would be at fault for, potentially, right, is putting it on speakerphone in your car while you're driving back to Denver with your spouse in the car.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm saying is that's actually the situations I was more, I mean, the Russian hacker thing, I think is, you know, that's really not what I think the question is or what Mike was raising. It was, are you in a public place? Are you on speakerphone with your spouse or your kids in the room? I mean, things that you don't think about when you're when you're not in the room here, right? That you're having that conversation and that it's not one to be shared. There again, it's just training. It's just understanding that that's, because I agree. I mean, I think you guys are responsible adults and can deal with that, but I think that's what really
that's
the
concern. That's a stretch, but anyway.
That would be those would be the things that are, you just don't even think about.
And we ought to, you know, really, we ought to, if we do this, when it comes time to do the executive session, we ought to add to the remarks that you make or that you make to, you know, ask the person calling in to confirm that it is private and that it's only them on the phone.
Yeah. Shelley, I apologize. Your button has been flashing for about half an hour here.
Just an open conversation going on here, but I'd like to speak to what Carl just brought up. To me, it doesn't meet the spirit of the meeting if someone's participating in the meeting and driving home from Denver in their car or driving anywhere in their car. And that's, I have a problem with the part of participating and voting by telephone, because if you're not visual, I mean, this is meant to be a public meeting where you're talking and interacting with the public, and that person who is not present here is not part of that public meeting. And I've been in many meetings where the person has phoned in and they're on the speakerphone, but half the time the group in the room forgets they're even on the little box in the middle of the table, and you know, it's difficult to have an interactive meeting. So, you know, I'd like to be open to this, but I'm very lukewarm on it. And I you know, I appreciate the limitations you've put on it, Carl. I do agree with not allowing executive session or quasi-judicial. But I think if we can't figure out a way to do it on the screen, and maybe so we have a little box cut out of that person with, then it's not really meeting the purpose and the spirit of having a public meeting and in purpose. And if you miss a meeting or two a year, I agree, you miss a meeting or two a year, and we all try not to, but I think it's not the end of the world, and sometimes that happens, and it may happen. So unless we can get the technology together to really do it well, I'm willing to try it under that circumstance, but I don't support having to call in by phone and not having the visual, because I just don't think that works.
Just to kind of address that, you know, I've been talking to Eric, and, you know, he thinks a pretty immediate solution is, you know, an iPad with Skype. A longer-term solution would be kind of installing screens and buying software, and he thinks that would be about $15,000 to $20,000. I suggest we try the easy version and see how we like it before we do the $20,000 investment, especially because there are gremlins running loose in the building.
We do have a statement in here that if members at a city council meeting may discontinue the use of the telephonic or electronic participation by a member where the telephonic or electronic participation results in unreasonable delays or interference in the city council meeting process. Such discontinuance shall be decided by a majority vote of those members physically present. So if we don't feel it's working, that's the way I read that. You know, we can basically say, yeah, sorry, Jonathan, you know, we can't hear you, you know, you're not hearing half of what we're saying. You're not hearing the audience, so we're gonna discontinue your participation. So I think that's key in here. And I share your concerns, Shelley. I think that this will work as well as the technology works.
Right.
I think. Steve.
I struggle a lot with this. I've missed a few meetings along the way in the last 3.5 years, and some that I've been very interested in, and I've watched these meetings that I've missed on YouTube because I'd be interested in trying to stay informed, and I think that's my responsibility as a counselor not to miss out on all these details, because as soon as you miss a meeting completely, and I've done that as well, then you all of a sudden have no idea what people are talking about or what's really happening around your community. The one thing I've missed is the participation, or at least the opportunity to hear the exec sessions, because often that is where really critical aspects occur that have a great impact to this community. So I think I would appreciate the opportunity to at least be able to listen by speakerphone. But I've sat in a box under the table here while out of town and sitting for work sessions on, you know, city manager issues or things that have gone on, and it is so almost impossible to, you can't hear Carl, but I can hear you, and you try to talk and you can't, and then I've got Mike going, Steve, are you still there? Are you still there? And what we have just doesn't work. And until we have something that would work, I think I'd really have a hard time supporting that. Like I say, I would like to be able to listen in on executive sessions, just because I get paralyzed when I miss one.
Yeah, and I would actually say,
I don't know what's happening, you know, I just can't hardly move forward.
That's actually, of all of these from my standpoint, the one, and I kind of included it in there for discussion. The executive sessions are the one place where I really most often want to have full participation by the council, whether you're here or not, because those really are, as you said, sometimes they're really critical. When you're giving direction to us on something that's highly sensitive, I want to make sure that I have heard from everybody on the council.
Yep.
And so I think even underneath the current regs, we can do that. And I think we have occasionally.
You and I have spoken directly on exec session items.
Right.
You know, because I did miss that or something.
Right.
And oftentimes on those executive session items, then we're acting on that issue at the next council meeting. And then you show up at the next council meeting, you're just like, I don't know what's going on, you know.
That was kind of my point on the morning meetings is, I mean, that's why we have them, to get ourselves up to speed with issues we're going to be dealing with that night. So we get up here when it's decision time and we actually have an idea of where we're headed or what we're talking about, or we have information that helps us tonight. I mean, that's the whole point of a pre-meeting. Otherwise, if we don't need that, I got a lot to do in the mornings. But I come to them to learn, so when I get here, I actually have hopefully something to say that's intelligent and quick.
And I don't know how I could make a decision without seeing the expression on Joe Elson's face tonight. You know, and I just use Joe as an example, but it's, you know, it's having the audience in front of you and having Christian, you know, and I need to see that to be able to make a decision and to actually vote. So
they need to see us too.
And they need to see us too. So I can't really, and I apologize.
Oh, that's fine.
I can't really.
No apology necessary.
You know, I can't really support this the way it's written, and the way our technology doesn't work at this juncture. I do think that, I would support, obviously, as I just said, I think that we should be able to be involved in exec sessions remotely. And, but outside of that, I'd hate to hear you vote over the telephone, and I'm thinking that you voted wrong because you weren't a part of this room and this setting and the energy and the vibe. And as I look down at Shelley, and she looks back at me, and we're, without verbalizing, we kind of get each other, on what we're thinking and where we're going on some issue. And you'd miss that completely.
But, Steve, respectfully, that defeats the whole idea of electronic communication. I mean, what you're saying is basically you have to be in the room to be an effective council member. And I respect what you're saying about nonverbal communication and looking out across the audience and understanding that there's only one person in the public right now, and he's been very patient, and maybe not being able to see that. But you have to ask yourself if that is the balance of what you need to do to, affect your responsibilities as a counselor, then I would say, wow, this is a person who cares enough to call in, even if it is just calling in, and is giving up their time to really, try to fulfill their duties. Now, would it be the same as being in the room? Not unless we have a electronic sort of a holograph or something, with somebody here with like 360-degree vision, and we'll never have that. But, the South Dakota, or excuse me, the special district group in Colorado says there's only really two requirements, and that is that a person can participate fully, including a quorum, in all boards, provided that they can be heard and hear everything that's going on. So the law sets sort of a boundary there that says that you don't have to use your eyes in order to be able to do this. And there's a possibility at some point that we may have like a blind council member who sits up here, and they're going to be disadvantaged, probably because they won't be able to see the nonverbal sorts of communication, but they might also bring some skills in communication that we haven't thought about either. So anyway, that's my view.
Yeah. Well, it may not be important to the law, but it's important to me.
Yeah. No, but that's you, though.
Yeah.
Which is good.
That affects how I would vote on this. And I suggest, actually, that we have more time to consider this. We don't have to take action on it tonight, and I know that Jonathan is sitting in Panama, in a Panamanian jail somewhere.
Watching YouTube.
And on YouTube.
Watching us on YouTube.
And wishing that he had the opportunity to comment. And I wish there was maybe a speakerphone here, but even though he commented, I'm not sure how comfortable I am with him voting, not being here. But, maybe we should, I would recommend that if we don't take an action and we postpone this until Jonathan has an opportunity and we all have an opportunity to contemplate this a little further. There's a lot of nuances in this that I think probably need, I've read it like 4 times over, and every time I read it I'm picking up something else rings in my head about like, well, that's awkward, or it's makes sense or something. I need more time to contemplate it, otherwise I can't support it.
Yeah, and I think that we wanted to get something in front of you. This is and like I said, I'm really going to push this to you guys in terms of what you want and how you want it to read. I can help with the comments here and there, but this is about how you manage yourself. So, whatever you guys need, we're happy to help. But
so I think this is a good start for the council members who really like this idea. I'm a little bit like probably Steve and Shelley. It makes me just a little nervous, but I'd say I kind of agree with you. Let's not take any action tonight. I'm not sure that it would pass, just kind of counting here where everybody's at. But if you guys that really want this to happen, that travel more than I do, see if you can tweak it to a point where where you can get some agreement, and that see if you can make a few words work different, or figure out the technology to let us know, because I don't think we have the technology. A phone sitting there is, been doing that for years, and that just never works.
Yeah,
so we're gonna have to have really good technology where that person is in the room, seeing us. And that, I don't know, we're ready to spend $15,000, $20,000 on that technology right at this moment.
Right now, our technology doesn't even allow us to see on our screens. We don't get to see the projector right now, so.
Turn around and look at it.
You know, that's a problem, you know, it's like, when I have to turn around and stare at that, I break my neck.
I'm really hoping that's fixed soon.
I would agree with you. Let's go ahead and put it off. Because otherwise we'd put it to motion, we're probably about half and half maybe, and even some voting for it or doing it like, oh, I'm not quite sure. So let's give ourselves another, I'm fine with that. I mean, I was one of the ones pushing this, and I'll probably remain pushing it, but I think we need some more time to get comfortable with it. I also agree that, you know, the ideal solution perhaps someday may be to spend 15 grand on the technology, but I think we're a long ways from that. And frankly, you know, my gut tells me let's tweak it, see how it works, give it a try. If we don't like it, do away with it. I don't know if the technology is going to be good enough to meet the requirements that we have for it, but I don't know that it won't either. Yeah. So once we think about it, if we can kind of get there, maybe there's some language to tweak. The way I'm looking at this is let's give it a shot and see how it works.
Why don't we,
maybe it'll be swimmingly, and some of the concerns we have will turn out not to be a big deal, or maybe we'll just all conclude, yeah, this just doesn't have the right feel.
We could put Jen on the iPad sitting up on the corner out in the hallway, and she could be participating in the meeting with us and see how it works. Let's try it once.
We ought to try
try a couple issues, see if it works.
Yeah, we could try that, or I could see a system where we have a screen on the wall where that council member can be
or on
seen.
that corner. You know, where Jim's sitting there,
or something like that. But how do we get there? And I agree with waiting, because I know, I think Jonathan feels pretty strongly about this, so it would be good to have him in the conversation.
And yeah, I agree with your comment, Todd. Let's say we say, okay, let's, you know, maybe a little begrudgingly, let's give it a shot. The first time we try to use the technology ought not to be when any of us are there. We ought to do some kind of trial runs and this and that. Maybe staff can try it first, and then we try it in some informal kind of session and see, you know, do we like this thing, or
yeah.
You know.
Yeah, we're gonna Deborah and I volunteer. We're gonna set iPads up here and we'll be at the bar.
There you go.
Well,
I thought the
that's in the dry run, but in the real one, I'm at the bar.
Those would be in our contract negotiations.
Morning work sessions would be a good place to trial run.
Yeah.
But you know, I also think we would probably go to a lot of effort here for something that we'd probably exercise the opportunity 2 or 3 times a year.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're just going to sort of continue this to the next agenda?
Yeah, I think
by
so.
then Jonathan will be back.
Motion to continue. Item number 22, City Council's remote attendance meetings.
Second.
We have a motion by Todd and a second by Shelley to continue agenda item 22, ordinance number 20, series of 2018, to our next regularly scheduled council meeting. Any further questions? Or comments? Let's call the question. Yeah.
Ingram, yes. Okay. Davis, yes. Gamba, yes. Leahy, yes. Voorhees, yes. Kalp, yes. Motion passes.
Boy, we sure have had a
Thank
lot
you.
of unanimous votes tonight.
We have. All right. Report from city manager. Report from city attorney.
You know, I'm pretty good actually. I was just going to say we have a lot of stuff going on right now. So you guys are going to start seeing some things related to RAPTA, to you know, CRCA implementation, just a number of things kind of rolling down the pike. So while it's all a little quiet, it won't be the last quarter.
And I guess I should add that Shelley has graciously agreed to come with me on those RAPTA meetings, and I think we have 5 days in a row of lunches. So thank you, Shelley.
Yes, we are wining and dining across the
Yes. And we didn't, there's correspondence, incoming, outgoing recommendation on public bathrooms downtown from Tourism Board. Do we need to address that in any way?
No, I think we should separately discuss it in an item. We just weren't there, and we just wanted to make sure you got the correspondence.
They should go on the alley lot and on the landing lot. And let's go get them there.
Well, we're in the.
I second that.
Oh, I saw they had two different spots. One was in the Centennial Park, which I think is too far south.
And across from the grind where
It's
they
only a
always
block
were.
south, and some of the businesses along that block might appreciate them being down
I
there.
thought about that, but I think I don't know how many people are gonna end up up there, and then they're just gonna go into the businesses down here, and we're gonna keep the same complaints coming.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's something to be said about drawing people
We can
south.
discuss that at a future.
Love that.
Well, it's on this. It's on here, I wanna talk about it. I'm kidding.
All right. We did.
It is my memorial bathrooms.
Yeah. This morning, we did not discuss council comments in our pre-meeting this morning because we were running out of time. So is there anyone who would like to make any council comments on any item?
I had one.
Shelley, go ahead.
Actually, I had a question from a member of the public, and Terry, thanks for being here. But it was someone who lives over in close to Palmer and like the 700 block. And they had a question about that there's a parking problem over there east of the Amtrak station and along 7th there when it goes along the river. So they're wondering if that shoulder along 7th can be improved and widened and maybe striped for diagonal parking, that we could gain a lot of spots there and it would help the neighborhood. And, you know, I don't know if we have any extra room along that railroad right of way, but we could add a lot of diagonal parking along that side of 7th. So just a suggestion from someone in that neighborhood. Yeah, thought it might help.
Yeah, I know people do park over there, but they usually park parallel.
They park parallel, and that was the whole point, was that they thought you could probably double the spaces along there if they could do diagonal. So, okay.
I came in this morning with a couple of items. So when we didn't get an opportunity to have comments this morning, I asked Mike about it, and he said, well, maybe if we have time at the end of the meeting, I'll let you talk.
Briefly.
Briefly. So I'm going to try to keep it brief.
Not going past 11.
I'm not going to talk about the city vehicle storage lot at 7th in Colorado. But there's a couple other things in the community that have struck me this week. We had an event here called a Cruise-a-thon, and I guess that they have to probably make application for a special event at the city. But I don't think that it probably allows them to lay down graffiti on our sidewalks. And now we've got, and these are photographs I took of this CAT and arrows along the sidewalks on Midland and on the bike path along below the high school. And this is in paint.
It's not chalk?
It's not chalk.
Oh.
Now you could easily chalk that or do something, even water.
Freestanding sign or something.
Freestanding sign, but what they did is they took the, construction paint that you use to mark out projects on the ground with, and we'll live with this forever. Yeah, you can have both these. So I think I think whoever, is responsible as the organizer of that event should have to clean that up. The other thing is, we've gone to so much effort on this bridge. It's just been trying for all of us to make it beautiful. To improve these wing streets, we've closed streets, we've laid brick, we've got enormous amount of money and effort into making all this beautification down there. I had the manager of Smoke approach me, and they're hoping to move their fence back out onto the Wing Street like they used to have. They didn't approach me as a city council person. They approached me as a contractor who might have an imagination as to how to get their fence back out there without tearing up the streetscape, without cutting into the brick or boring into the flagstone. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, give me a couple of days and let me come up with that. Well, the one thing I noticed is that the Pullman and Juicy Lucy's and even the Riviera over on the north side of the Riviera all have fences that actually don't attach at all to the sidewalk. All they do is have a steel plate and they're attached to their building, and so they haven't really destroyed our infrastructure. 2 days later, I go out and here's a new fence being erected, not by them, but by somebody else, and they are hammer drilling into our brand new bricks and our brand new flagstone to install this fence. The problem with that is, and that we've seen this in the Smoke Alley over the years, is they put it up every spring, they take it down every fall. The next spring they put it up again, but those screw holes don't work, so they bore more holes in it. And they actually absolutely just Swiss cheese this street to death. And so we're doing that again, and I see absolutely no reason why we would allow that. And I just couldn't help but be completely disgusted by that happening. And in fact, they're anchoring it to bricks that aren't even attached. You know, these bricks are just sand set. So you walk up and it's just, you know, it has no structural integrity at all to it. And come fall, which we're all on top of, they'll pull it out, leave holes in it, and next spring they'll want to drill new holes in it again. So anyway, that's my comment.
Steve, may I respond? I don't believe we're going to let them drill new holes anymore.
Well,
is that correct?
No, that's just not the way that works.
I believe we're going to start going after them.
Once you drill a hole and put a blue screw in it, you're not going to use that again. It's just not going to happen that way.
Then we may make them pay to replace it.
Yeah.
How about we just have a policy that
no
holes.
Yeah,
just a steel plate that's resting there, and there's you know, I got to believe that we can structurally mount it to the you know, the wall of the building. You know, you come out with, you know, hard fencing that is, yeah, it's not drilled into the sidewalk or bricks or our flagstone. It's just resting on the sidewalk, but it's, you know, structurally sound in terms of it. I mean,
not much different than construction fencing.
Yeah.
But if you make it just like Pullman and Juicy's did, they just used a heavier steel plate, and it just sits there just fine. So
we could look into that. I think we've just kind of required different things.
The regulations do allow for attachment to the sidewalk. We could certainly change that. We can bring that back to you. I think there is a way to anchor into the brick, and I know that Matt also got up to come up here, so he may be able to speak with a little bit more authority about what we would want. We can change those regulations. Today, the regulations do allow for attachment to the sidewalk. The other thing is that it also says that at the point of unbolting, that they can be required to bring it back to its original condition. So replace those sandstone pieces or those individual bricks.
And we do intend to follow up on that.
Do we have a supply of that flagstone, that tan flagstone? Because
yeah.
We've probably got about 10 pieces left over from the JV work that we just hauled out to the boneyard a couple of days ago, and we have a pallet of the clay brick. I would agree with Steve that there's almost 0 point of actually attaching to the brick because it doesn't really do anything except for maybe a horizontal you can't kick the fence.
Right.
Pullman and Juicy Lucy's, they have a little bit more substantial fence than the current fence that you're talking about that was going up. It's a little bit less sturdy. So it has the ability to, the other ones have the ability to sit on a big metal plate and maybe not be pushed around as much. So maybe that's something we have to look at, is what is considered a substantial fence, so that it doesn't have to be anchored into the bricks on the sidewalk.
Well, I'd recommend, make a motion, whatever, that we change that regulation immediately, because I just cannot see allowing people to destroy what we've just installed.
My concern is the bricks are one thing, because I assume that we'll be able to obtain those bricks for a long time. In 5 years, if we're still drilling into the flagstone and for some reason we can't get that specific stone from that specific quarry, we're going to have a completely unmatched stone sitting there when we replace it. And
well, and even the brick, you put in a new brick, it looks like a new brick. It ages
so.
differently.
Yeah.
It's got, it's
I
walked
think you're right.
on
We
differently.
you just don't drill into there. Use heavier plates to secure that fencing. And
when we were doing 7th Street, we had to pull up a couple of the benches that were down there that are actually bolted to the bricks also. Some of our benches and bike racks are bolted to them. Funny enough, we just took the brick with us and put a new brick in, and when we moved it, we just put that brick right back into the spot for another brick. So,
which you can do when it's
there's
new.
thoughts on how to control it.
Well, my main concern, and the reason I felt the urgency to bring it up now, is we just lost that opportunity on this fence that was just installed. But there are more that'll be coming, and I'd like to nip that in the bud. There's no reason, except for maybe they don't want to spend the extra money for the nicer fence and they want to take the cheap route. But the cheap route shouldn't result in tearing up our infrastructure like that.
Can I ask a question on, will the entertainment district allow us not to have a fence? I mean, do you have to have a fence? At what point?
Yeah. So if you're going to, as your individual liquor license premises, you have to have some way to control the passage of, there has to be some kind of a fence there. If you're going to have that outside seating and you're going to serve alcohol in that outside.
Regulation?
That's a state regulation.
Okay.
The entertainment district, you would have unlimited timeframes. You would do that, but you would have to establish that boundary line and have it policed. And by policed, I mean you have to have somebody watching it, not the police, to control, have that liquor area controlled in the same fashion. It's just a bigger area, but it's still the same thing. Unless you guys want to go to a complete open container in town, which I don't think you do. Or maybe you do. I don't know. I keep forgetting where you're from, so that's like.
And
I don't see the problem.
I don't see the problem, but that's
to address
a different state.
So what do we need to do to change this regulation?
We'll just bring back those regulations. They were approved by council originally, so we'll just bring them back with some changes. We'll bring back a recommendation and language, and then hopefully we can move forward.
I appreciate
we can do it at the
that.
next meeting.
I appreciate Smoke coming to me and saying, you got any ideas? What can we do? We don't want to go out there and start drilling this new flagstone and brick too. So the only other thing I have, and now I've taken 12 minutes. Can you believe that? Is the old sewer plant. It just looks like hell. It's one thing to have an old sewer plant that was some green grass growing up there, but it's become a dump for, is it just leftover from the Grand Avenue Bridge project, or it's just disgusting?
So the answer to that question is, we're cleaning it up as of this week. We've started. I don't know if you've noticed that or not, but all the brick that was in there that's left over from the 7th Street, Wing Street projects got hauled out of there. We've been doing that ourselves, so we don't have to hire a Gould or Heil or somebody to do that. So the streets department's been doing that. It did become kind of a storage area once we kicked JV off of, we politely asked JV to leave 7th Street.
Right.
We had to give them some form of staging area to do that. We didn't have to, we politely gave them some form of staging area. So they kind of used it and abused it a little bit. They've been helping clean up. Gould is out there reorganizing their leftover materials from the 7th Street project. So by the end of the week, early next week, I'm anticipating that's going to be generally cleaned up.
Oh, good. The mountains of concrete that's stacked up there. I just noticed it when I went to music the other night.
Are you talking about within the boundary on the west side of the tracks also? So that is an interesting thing. We processed as much dirt as we could over there with anticipation that we would utilize it potentially with a next little phase of clarifier removal. So it's kind of stacked there to either have Gould remove it, which they will do for free. I'm sure they can use it, or it can be stacked there for a while if we decide to continue any demolition of the existing wastewater plant on that side. So on the east side, we're getting that cleaned up. The wastewater division is going to install the force main themselves that we need to, so we're going to actually save that $60,000 we had approved for Gould to do the work.
Okay.
They would like to do that work themselves. They have the capabilities and the equipment now. And then Gould will come back in, finish the demo of the little pieces of concrete. It'll get smoothed out, and there will be rotomillions on it, and they will be compacted. It'll be an expansion of the parking lot. On the other side, if we decide not to budget anything this year for continued wastewater demolition, then if we're not going to for a while, maybe we'll have Gould go in there and start utilizing that material and hauling it back out so that there's not mountains of millions in rubble over there that we were going to use to continue filling clarifiers.
Yeah, it's, you know, I understand that we don't have the budget to do anything with this sewer plant right now, and we're trying to remove it as we can. But you know, it's such a gateway to Two Rivers Park. Everybody funnels past it, coming and going, and down our river corridor, and it just shouldn't be become a complete storage yard of stuff. I guess I really personally I wish there was just, even though we're not using it, I'd like to be able to ride past it on my bicycle and see green grass growing in there instead of stacked up with sewer pipe and fire hydrants and all that stuff. Surely we've got somewhere else we can store stuff other than downtown on our river.
Yeah. So, yeah. And if I may, I think that's what we hope to get to, which is why we brought it to you to start taking it down. And if I could address the first non-comment on on parking, I'm really trying to find a way to get a parking manager in the budget, just because I think downtown parking is complicated, almost like a ecosystem, and I want to make well thought out decisions, not just snap to paid parking, because if we don't do it well, it will fail.
Oh, and I will never suggest that. But I will continue to want to talk about that parking lot, particularly, and the enforcement on it. And I can't wait for another parking study.
I don't think we need a parking study. We have them. I just think we need someone who can concentrate on downtown parking garages we want to build. We don't have anyone who has the capacity right now to do it, and we need that to do it well.
Well, we don't have time for that discussion tonight, because I have a list of bullet points that I wish to discuss about that and the enforcement on that parking lot. And if we are going to enforce parking along our streets, we should enforce parking in our city-owned parking lot and not just allow it to become a storage facility for abandoned vehicles with no regard. And so we'll talk about that down the road.
All right.
I have one more quick question.
Right, Shelley.
I did have a comment from a resident of North Glenwood and asking about the hydro seeding on the landing site, because it looks like they did a little bit around the edge and then it kind of stopped. Is that moving forward, or do we know a schedule?
Yeah. So the answer to that question is CDOT came in and hydro seeded with native seeding what they were planning on doing. Okay. They got a little exuberant when they came along the side over by Martin's and CDOT's area over there. So starting on Monday is what's anticipated right now, is David Small will go in there, start building the irrigation system on the north landing on Monday. That'd be a pretty quick process. He will re-rake everything out. He will seed it with the bluegrass that we had requested that he seed it with, so it's a little bit nicer grass. And he'll be seeding over that native area right there. adjacent to Martin's. Everything below that to the wall, from the wall to the top of the slope will be native seed.
Okay.
And we will get it the best we can with the sprinkler system that we have accommodated for or already authorized. But that's what's going to happen.
Okay, was there any, did anybody get a chance to check in with the DDA on landscaping of that strip that's between the sidewalk and the roadway there, on whether that can be a flower landscaping that's kind of anticipated, or if it's just going to be lawn?
I'm not sure we checked in with them. We did go back and look at the plans. The plans do not cover that particular area, so
They don't.
we'll probably throw that in there.
Okay. Yeah, well, that might be something we can talk to DDA about next week, or next meeting, when we meet with them.
I'll bring her up to speed on that one,
Thanks.
sorry.
Okay.
All right, any further council comments?
I think we're done.
Except we have an executive session, and I realized I don't have the motion sheets for an executive session.
Under your signature folder?
I'm sorry?
Under your signature folder?
Oh, under my signature. You mean I gotta look through everything here? All right, thank you. All right. So we have an executive session scheduled on the agenda to discuss the following: the Garfield County Industrial Development, DDA parcel located at 714 Grand Avenue, and the Confluence redevelopment. Is there a motion?
Thanks, Jessica.
Yeah,
Jerry,
thanks, everybody.
Matt. Appreciate you guys sticking around.
Yeah, thanks, Christian.
Thanks, Christian.